In one of the rooms, which had no furniture at all, there were two men. One of them was in a fighting stance. Someone asked about one of the men, and the answer was heard that this man had come here to defeat everyone in the dojo. Near the half-open doors of that room, there were younger people sitting. They were looking at the men, discussing whether the guy was a bad guy. Someone said that he was, and the others asked Alucia what they would do then. The white-haired girl frowned slightly and leaned one hand on her knee, saying that they shouldn't worry and that everything would be fine, because after all, Beryl-sensei was with them. The second man, the brunette, picked up his sword and raised it up. The man with long black hair charged the second man, with a loud sound of a sword cutting through the air. The brunette didn't move a muscle in his face. He was still as unperturbed. He raised his sword, holding it with both hands. Suddenly, the brunette attacked the second man with a loud whistle, swinging his sword right next to his face. The black-haired man leaned back a little. The brunette was now right in front of him. The black-haired man had drool running from his mouth, and his eyes looked empty. His long hair was curling right in front of his face. The short-haired brunette turned to the dark-haired man. The second man fell to the floor, exhausted. The white-haired girl, with a tear on her cheek, looked at them with displeasure. It was clear from her look that she had not mastered her teacher's skill. The short-haired brunette's face was still calm and emotionless. He had bright green eyes and sharp features. He could handle it. The state of Leberis with a monarchical fort of rule. This country is the homeland of many famous knights and adventurers, about whom strange rumors circulated. Rumor has it that most of these heroes who wrote their names into history had only one person as their mentor. This person was known as the Sword Master of the Deep. One clear day, horses were walking along the road, loudly clattering, pulling a cart. Many birds were flying in the sky. Small houses were visible nearby on the hills, and large mountains were on the horizon. The coachman, with a black mustache and beard, held the reins tightly. He said they were almost there. His eyes were covered by his hat. In the carriage sat a girl who thanked him. The girl with blonde hair looked out the window, from which a little light fell on her. A sweet smile was visible on her lips. She sighed contentedly and said that she was overcome by nostalgia. In this small settlement there was a house, which was surrounded by a small stone fence, and a trodden path led directly to its front door. An elderly man with a bushy mustache and beard entered the door. He had long blonde hair and prominent cheekbones. He frowned and looked at someone. A large room, which was equipped with special equipment for training, and in the center a short-haired guy was training. The man called out to the guy and asked if he was really training at such a time. An older man asked why Beryl couldn't be a good son. The man told the boy that, before he died, he wanted to see his grandson. The man stopped and rubbed his eyes tiredly, calling out to his father. The boy leaned his elbow on his sword, which was resting on the ground. Sweat was running down his face as he said that, after he took over the dojo, the number of students increased. He asked if he had become a good son yet. The father said no. The father moved away from the door a little and asked if there was a nice girl among his students. A short-haired man looked out from behind the door and sternly said that the dojo was not a place for flirting. Beryl's gaze was tired and sullen. He frowned a little, holding the door with his hand and looking away, asking about who would want to marry a swordsman from the wilderness. Every swordsman in their country aspires to become a knight or adventurer, bowing to the ruler. This man had trained with a sword since he was a child, and he had the same goal as everyone else. He dreamed that one day he would go to the city and save many people with the help of his sword. But he ended up becoming a self-defense teacher somewhere in the wilderness, and most of his students were children. Beryl watched his students train. His face was already lined and his beard was stubbled. He thought that this was how it all ended, but it suited a man like him. One day, a man in high boots walked through the short but thick grass. While Beryl was training and swinging his sword over and over again, he remembered his students. Suddenly, he remembered one of his students who told him that when she grew up, she wanted to marry him. The brunette grinned slightly, holding his sword in the air, and thought about what one of his students had once told him. Suddenly, a long-haired girl entered the room where the man was training. She looked at Beryl and apologized for disturbing him. The man turned around and looked at the guest. The sweet girl addressed the man as if he were a teacher. A slight smile was visible on her lips. The man had sweat running down his face, and he looked at the girl with no particular surprise, asking if it was Alucia. After some time, they were already sitting at the table. Beryl told her that a lot of time had passed and he could hardly recognize her. Alucia said that he looked the same as before. The man smiled and thought that she had become so grown up. Alucia Citrus is a leader of the Knights of Leberis. She is a very outstanding person. This proud and serious girl was once his student. This girl had a good talent and learned very quickly. She just watched him and repeated his movements. And now, after 4 years, he had nothing to teach her. When this girl left the dojo, he gave her a sword as a parting gift. The man noticed the same sword near Alucia. Beryl asked in surprise if she still used it, since she could buy something better in the city. The blonde girl took her sword and said with a smile that it was not so, because it suited her perfectly. There was a slight blush on her cheeks. The man asked if that was true. The girl told her teacher that in addition to her usual duties as the head of the knights, she also personally trains them. The man was a little taken aback and said, a little confused, that it was great. This girl personally trains knights. In fact, the instructor of the knightly order is the best swordsman in the kingdom. The man smiled sincerely and said that it was great that his student became a royal instructor, and that he was very proud of her. Suddenly, the girl said that she recommended him to become their special instructor, after which they agreed without hesitation. Beryl was silent for a moment, and the atmosphere became tense. Now, the man's smile was nervous, and he asked what she was talking about. The girl said that they, the Knights Order of Leberis, wanted him to become their instructor. The man was shocked and stood in a stupor. The man wondered why she was offering this to him, since the royal instructor of the Leberis Knights was the best swordsman in the kingdom. Alucia said that a carriage was waiting for him outside, and that he should go with her to the capital so that they could make adjustments to their program. Beryl was still very shocked by this news, and asked if this was really necessary right now. The fair-haired girl showed the man a paper with something written on it and said that it was an imperial decree with the royal seal. After some time, the man and Alucia were already standing by the carriage. Alucia said that she would climb into the carriage after him, and the coachman helped the man climb into the carriage. Beryl felt a little awkward and looked at the coachman, asking if he could wear shoes. And so, after some time, they were already in Beltrain. This is the capital of the Kingdom of Leberis, and also the official garrison of the Knights of Leberis. Valtrain was built up with a large number of houses and towers, and at the top a flag with a coat of arms was flying. Alucia and the man stood on a small stage in front of a large number of knights. The girl pointed her hand at Beryl and said that from now on, he would cooperate with the Knights of Leberis and become their special instructor. The blonde girl said, with a serious expression, that she wanted them all to give it their all. Beryl looked a little awkward and tired. Beryl looked at this huge crowd of people and thought that it was amazing, and that there were more than 100 people here. Looking at them, you can see that everyone here is quite experienced. Suddenly, Alucia pointed at Beryl again and added that Beryl Gardenant was much stronger than her, so they should learn well from him. He looked at the girl in shock. Alucia looked at Beryl and, pointing to the crowd of people, asked him to say a few words. The man was a little taken aback and did not know what to say. Beryl felt very awkward and scratched the back of his head, wondering what she was saying. He said hesitantly that his name was Beryl Gardenant. Beryl thought that he was just a middle-aged guy and didn't know what to do. Everyone started chatting. One blonde guy from the crowd looked a little displeased at Beryl and his awkward performance. He frowned a little and remained silent. When Beryl and Alucia were riding in the carriage, Beryl asked her if a few times a month would be enough. Alucia told him that it was. She said with a small smile that he already had many students, so it would be enough for them if he came to them from time to time. The man put his hand on his shoulder and thought that he didn't even think that these knights needed his advice. He and Alucia were walking around the city, and Alucia asked if he wanted anything for his tea. Beryl said yes, and apologized for making her go with him to buy souvenirs. Beryl turned around and looked at the other people, saying that it looked like they were attracting a lot of unwanted attention. Alucia looked at Beryl seriously and asked if it bothered him. Beryl said that this attention was to be expected, since the head of the knights was walking with some middle-aged man. Then he asked if she was used to this. A blush appeared on the girl's cheeks, and she covered her mouth, turning her head away. Alucia began to say that it was a date, but in such a way that it was not audible. Beryl asked if she had said anything, but Alucia said no. Suddenly, a stranger approached them, and when they turned to her, she asked if it was the head of the Royal Knights. She said with a slight mockery that no one would have thought that she was shopping with a man. This stranger was dressed quite openly. The stranger said with a smile that it was very interesting. As it turned out, Alucia knew her and asked her what she wanted with a grin. Beryl was surprised that they knew each other. Beryl saw the Black Adventurer's Guild plate on her chest. This shocked Beryl greatly, and he thought that she was the strongest adventurer. Suddenly, Lysander stared at something with her eyes wide. He thought about what happened. Lysander, very worried and shocked, grabbed Beryl by the shoulders and loudly asked if this was Beryl Sensei. This scared Beryl a little, and he did not understand what was happening. Lysander said a little thoughtfully that it was true and that there could be no mistake. Beryl asked, a little surprised, if it was Shorna. Lysander blushed a little and smiled. Beryl remembered a little girl with shaggy hair. She said anxiously that everything was true and she was Shorna, then said that he still remembered her, even though 20 years had passed. He said with a tremor in his body that he was glad that she was doing well. Remembering that little girl, he thought about how Shorna was an orphan, and he took her in 20 years ago. He taught her for about 3 years, and then a family adopted her. Alucia pointed at Lysander and called out loudly, saying that the teacher was very busy right now, so she should take her hands off him. Lysander looked at Alucia with a slightly displeased expression. Fluffy clouds floated in the sky, and there was silence. Alucia and Lysander looked at each other angrily, and Lysander bared her teeth. Beryl stood between them, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, Lysander offered Beryl to give him a tour of the city and the Adventurers Guild. But Alucia clearly didn't like it. She said a little displeasedly that the teacher was currently walking with her and Lysander shouldn't disturb them. Several men were watching them. They said that it was the leader of the King's Knights and Lysander, and that they were not often seen together. Then they noticed Beryl and asked who the old man was with them. Alucia walked ahead of everyone and said hello. She said that she came here to show her teacher the shop. The man who stood behind the counter said that they had just received a new shipment of swords. Beryl looked at Alucia and Lysander, who were standing near the counter and chatting. He thought that wherever they went, people showed them respect, and they really had become strong women. After a while, Beryl picked up one of the swords, examining it. He thought that this was what it was like, a knightly order forge, that they had some pretty good swords here. As he examined the sword, he wondered if they were selling it too. Suddenly, a blacksmith came up to Beryl and said with a smile that if he wanted, he could try it. Beryl turned around a little and said that it was a good idea. After that, the blacksmith led him to the training pole and pointed at it with the same smile. Beryl looked at the training pole a little uncomprehendingly. Lysander grabbed her chin and said that it had been a while since she had seen the teacher use a sword. Alucia agreed with her. Beryl covered his eyes with his hand and thought about how she had only recently seen it in the dojo. The girls encouraged him. Beryl thought that even with a sharp blade, they would still have to apply force to cut the fish's spine. He looked at the training log. He thought that the makiwara, invented in the East, was a training device for practicing strikes, imitating the density of the human body. Not every blade can cut it, and more often than not, they simply bend. Beryl held his sword tightly and then swung it. He thought that today had been a rather tiring day and he should calm down, because it was a good sword. His gaze was calm. He tried to concentrate. Beryl delivered a quick strike to the training post and the sword cut through it with ease. After the blow was delivered, Beryl got into a fighting stance, and the severed upper part of the pole began to slide to the side. The girls watched Beryl with satisfied grins. Lysander said it was great, as always. The blacksmith watched Beryl in shock, his eyes wide. He noticed the chopped-off top of the pole, which, although slightly slid down, still remained on top. He said in surprise that it was still standing. After a while, the girls asked in surprise if they would buy anything. Beryl said that they would, and that he hadn't brought much money with him anyway. He wanted to add something else. Alucia asked what else he wanted to say, but Beryl scratched his head a little awkwardly and said nothing. Lysander asked about that sword, and Alucia said that she knew. The man looked at the sword angrily and asked in confusion what was wrong. He came to his workers and asked with displeasure which of them had put down the sword, then called them feeble-minded. The man showed them the sword and loudly declared that the sword was completely blunt. Then he asked which of them had put it up for sale. The workers began to apologize to him. The man placed his sword against another training post and said that it was a dull sword. Then he turned his gaze to the cut training post and looked at it silently. He remembered Beryl, who was able to cut through that pillar with a dull sword, and said that the sword master from the outback was still in shape. It was already deep night. There were many stars in the sky. Beryl was riding in a carriage along an empty road. He looked out the window and thought that he would become an instructor of the knightly order. He thought that this was a big step forward in his career. Then he looked down and thought that he should not have been trusted with such a role. He thought that, in essence, they were deceiving these knights, and if he screwed up, then not only would he be in trouble, but Alucia as well. Beryl tiredly massaged the bridge of his nose a little and thought about how he needed to figure something out. But then he mentally came to the conclusion that as soon as he got home, he would figure everything out. After some time, Beryl came home. Despite the late night, the lights were still on in the windows. Father called out to Beryl very seriously. He told him not to come home for a while. Beryl was kneeling in front of his father and asked him, very surprised and confused, what he was talking about. After some time, Beryl returned to Alucia. It was already light outside. Alucia, with a little pity and surprise, asked if he had been thrown out. She and Beryl were sitting in chairs in front of a table, opposite each other. Alucia asked what had happened. He recalled how, when he returned home, his father was sitting at the table with some guy. The father was a little happy about his son's return, and the guy got up from his chair and greeted the teacher and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Beryl greeted Landier and said that he had heard that he had become an adventurer. Beryl then said that he was glad that he was doing well. Landier bowed and thanked him, saying that Beryl looked very well. The guy, with a sincere smile, pointed to his girlfriend with a child in her arms, then said that he had a child, and therefore he thinks that he will resign and take care of his family. The guy was beaming with happiness. Beryl thought it meant he had married a girl younger than him. Beryl covered his eyes with his hand and said it was good that he had a family. Afterwards, he lowered his hand and asked the boy with interest what he was planning next. The father himself began to talk about it. Father stood behind the guy who was smiling a little awkwardly and said that he wanted to appoint Landred as the manager of the dojo. Beryl was very shocked by this news and stood there with his eyes wide open and in a stupor. He asked his father what he was talking about. Without much emotion, his father said that he must now go back to the capital and do his duty. Landred clenched his fists and told the teacher to leave everything to him. Beryl still stood there in a stupor. Beryl recalled how his father told him not to come back until he found himself a wife. Beryl was already completely shocked and did not know what to say. After such a story, Alucia was surprised and covered her mouth with her hand. Then she turned her head away a little, and a blush appeared on her cheeks. She said quietly that it was good. Beryl, already upset, asked what she was talking about. Alucia said that she meant that it was a terrible situation. Beryl covered his face with his hand and said that he needed to find a place to spend the night. Then he apologized for asking her for it. Alucia smiled sweetly and said that everything was fine. Afterward, she asked him what he thought about staying at her house. Beryl was very uncomfortable and said that he definitely didn't. Beryl looked around and asked if this was the Adventurers Guild. He then noticed that it was very lively. Alucia said that if he was looking for a place to stay, this would be the best place to look for information. Suddenly, Lysander saw them. Her hair was disheveled. She scratched her head and blushed a little, after which she asked in great surprise if it was the teacher. She began to fix her hair a little nervously and asked if he had come home yesterday. Beryl raised his hand wearily and said that he had, but something had happened. Beryl politely said that he would like to ask her for help. Lysandra agreed with a sweet smile. Alucia looked at them a little displeased. After some time, Lysandra said that she understood what had happened. She had dressed by then and said that in that case she would show him some cheap seats. Beryl, sitting at the table, thanked her politely. She pointed to a seat on the paper and asked what about this seat. Suddenly, Alucia interrupted her and asked her to wait a bit. Beryl looked warily at Alucia. Alucia pointed to another place and said that since the teacher would be living here now, he would often come to the nights, and therefore he should live closer to her house. Lysander frowned and asked what she was talking about. She looked at Alucia seriously and asked if she was going to bother the teacher again. Alucia asked if Lysander was going to bother the teacher all the time. Beryl looked at them a little scared, calling out to both of them quietly. This all happened on the first floor. One of the men put down a mug of beer and asked what was going on. The girls held their hands on the paper and looked at each other silently. The atmosphere was very tense, after which they took their swords and attacked each other sharply. The situation was very tense. The girls met each other's eyes. They were very angry with each other. They were preparing to attack each other again. Suddenly, Beryl climbed onto the table and took their swords. The girls looked at him in surprise and confusion. Beryl walked forward without any emotion, but it was all just the girl's fantasy, and Beryl sat quietly in his place. He looked at the girls in confusion and asked what had happened. Lysander scratched her head and asked if they would consider it a draw. Alucia turned her head away and said that he would have interrupted them anyway. Beryl looked at them blankly and asked what they were talking about. He looked away awkwardly and thought that for a moment he thought they would draw their blades. After some time, in one of the multi-story buildings, a man opened the door of one of the rooms and said that it was his room. The man who showed Beryl his room asked him to convey his best wishes to Lysander-sama. Beryl agreed. Beryl looked out the window. He thought that this was a pretty nice room, although the barracks and the guild were a bit far away. But the market and the blacksmith shop were nearby. He remembered Lysander and the disgruntled Alucia, who said that she wanted to live near the teacher. He thought that it was all thanks to the two of them. But for some reason, Alucia looked a little irritated. After a while, Beryl took a few sips from his mug. He put the mug of beer on the table and loudly said that he was a disgrace. A blush was visible on his cheeks. Beryl lay down on his arm and began to examine the mug. He thought that thanks to his students he became an instructor of knights and also got this nice room. He became a little sad and quietly said that he was a very pitiful old man. He sat alone at the table, on which stood a bottle of alcohol, and asked what Alucia was expecting from him. The next day it was quite light outside. Beryl was walking next to Alucia. Alucia asked Beryl if something was bothering him. Beryl massaged the bridge of his nose a little tiredly and said that it wasn't, and that everything was fine. They came to a place where many swordsmen were training. They were training on each other and on dummies. Alucia said that this was the Knights' training hall. The loud stomping of knights could be heard in the hall. The white-haired boy deftly struck his opponent, and anger was clearly visible in his eyes. He spun around, attacking his opponent again. His opponent looked at his broken sword with fear, from which a small smoke was coming. The blond guy was already sweating. He frowned and confidently called out the next opponent. Beryl and Alucia were watching them, and Alucia said that they were practicing their moves and sword skills here. Beryl looked at them worriedly and thought that they could end each other's lives like this. Suddenly, Alucia called out loudly to everyone and told them to listen. She said that from today on, Beryl-sensei would be their instructor, so they had to follow the new schedule. Some of the boys said they didn't doubt their commander. But Beryl had been her teacher as a child. They also said that, in that case, they didn't think they had anything to learn from the old man. Beryl frowned a little and looked at the knights, thinking that he had expected this, that he was not very welcome here. Then he noticed their angry looks. Suddenly, someone from the crowd raised their hand and called the teacher. A cute little girl in a short dress and with a bow on her head waved to Beryl. She said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Beryl was very surprised and asked if it was Kuluni. A blush appeared on her cheeks and she smiled widely, saying that she was finally able to greet him. Beryl asked if she could really become a real knight, then sincerely said that he was very happy for her. She awkwardly shook her hands and said that she still had a lot to strive for. After that, she threw in her fists and excitedly said that she was glad that he would be teaching her again, because after all, she had only been able to go to the dojo for a few years. Tears began to stream down Beryl's cheeks. Alucia approached Beryl worriedly, asking what was wrong. The sweet girl began to apologize to Beryl, but he covered his face with his hand and said that everything was fine. They had just become so grown up. Beryl looked at the girls and thought about how long he would be dependent on his students and that it was time to gather his courage. Alucia told Kuluni that she should stop talking during training. Kuluni agreed, fearfully. Beryl frowned and thought that he was just an old man, and he was just starting to think about what he needed, when suddenly, a blond boy called out to him. He was one of the knights. Beryl and Alucia turned their attention to him and looked at him. A blond boy, very athletic, holding two swords in his hands. Alucia asked him what he wanted. Beryl looked at him silently and thought that this was the guy. Kuluni said with a smile that he had trained very well today. The guy looked very serious. He said that he was Hembrit's Drought and that he had been entrusted with the post of vice commander of the Knightly Order. Beryl thought that he understood him, and that he had a rather evil look. Hembrits looked at Beryl with great animosity, and Beryl thought that he was out for blood. Hembrits said that Leberis was very proud of his Knightly Order, and Beryl became the new instructor here. But to stay, he had to be a very skilled swordsman. He gripped the sword tightly in his hand. He continued that, although the commander herself recommended him, he would like to fight with him. Hembrits confidently handed Beryl one of the swords. Many looked at them in surprise. Hembrits turned to Beryl. His eyes were filled with seriousness, and he himself frowned slightly. Beryl looked at Hembrits with surprise and a little fear. Alucia looked at Beryl with a small, sweet smile. She thought that it was finally the teacher's time. Beryl looked nervous and a little unsure. Hembrits confidently held one of the swords in front of Beryl. Alucia thought that now everyone would be able to see the light of his sword. Knights of Leberis. The flag with a coat of arms fluttered in the wind. The knightly order is known for being the strongest in the kingdom. It includes only warriors of the kingdom, and after joining it, they undergo strict training. It is said that one knight of Leberis is comparable in strength to 10 warriors from other kingdoms. Vice Commander Hembrits. He is without a doubt one of the best swordsmen in this kingdom. Beryl thought about Hembrits' decision to challenge him to a duel. Beryl fawned slightly and pressed his lips together. Beryl wondered how it had come to this. Beryl began to imagine different scenarios. He thought that if he refused now, they would doubt him even more. But if Hembrits defeated him, it would cause even more harm. Beryl turned and looked at Alucia. He thought that the worst thing would be if Alucia was thrown out because of him. Beryl mentally asked Alucia for help. A slight blush appeared on Alucia's cheeks. She told Beryl with the sweetest smile that this was a wonderful opportunity, and then asked why he didn't take advantage of it and show everyone his skills. After some time, Beryl and Hembrits were already standing opposite each other in the center of the hall. The knights around them were chatting loudly about something. The boys were discussing what was going on, and one of them said that their vice commander would now be fighting the new instructor. Beryl massaged the bridge of his nose and thought that there was no way to refuse now. Kaluni watched the scene with concern and said that this was the first time she saw the teacher fight with someone. She was tormented by the question of whether everything would be okay. Alucia seemed quite calm. She asked why she was hesitant. Kaluni remembered Hembrits' muscular body and said that he possessed inhuman strength, that with one blow of a wooden sword he ended the life of an enraged bull, and there were people who broke their arms blocking his blows. Alucia confidently said that everything would be fine, and she should watch their fight carefully. Alucia's words made Kaluni wary. Hembrits frowned at Beryl. He thought that when he heard that an instructor recommended by the commander herself was coming to them, he was delighted, and he hoped to ask him for some advice on swordsmanship. Hembrits remembered the first time he met Beryl, and how awkward Beryl had been. He thought about how, when he saw him, he was standing in front of a middle-aged guy, and he looked like a dead fish. At their first meeting, Hembrits did not look at Beryl very well. At that moment, he began to have suspicions about Beryl. Hembrits thought that the commander was a very kind girl, so if her teacher asked her to recommend him as an instructor, she would not be able to refuse him. The fair-haired boy became wary. He thought that although he could be wrong, Beryl could be trying to sneak into the knightly order for some personal, vile reasons of her own. This made him even angrier. Hembrits took a fighting stance, ready to attack and defend. Beryl was wary and thought about Hembrits' bloodlust, then wondered if Hembrits wanted to end his life right here. Beryl sighed a little tiredly, looking at the confident Hembrits. He handled his sword carefully and finally, thinking that he should pull himself together and try not to lose stupidly. Beryl mentally told himself that he needed to concentrate, then got into a fighting stance while the people around him continued to chat loudly. The blonde boy and Beryl stood opposite each other, ready to attack. Hembrits' gaze was wary and a little scared, while Beryl looked very calm and confident. Alucia waved her hand and announced the start of the fight. Hembrits immediately ran at Beryl with a ferocious look. He was clearly very determined. Beryl stood his ground unwaveringly. Hembrits attacked Beryl with great force. Beryl frowned as he watched his blow. Everyone around watched as Hembrits attacked Beryl, and flash of light from such a force was heard around them. Everyone looked at them with alarm, with frightened looks, but only Alucia remained calm. Suddenly, Hembrits' look changed. He became a little frightened and shocked, and now Hembrits was under Beryl's sword. Beryl looked confident and stern. He leaned the sword against Hembritz's neck, thus lowering him to the ground. Hembritz looked at Beryl's sword on his shoulder with anger and surprise, but then he quickly stood up, and Beryl moved away from him a little. Everyone exclaimed in shock that the vice commander had really lost. The knights watching this fight were discussing what happened and that it was too fast to see anything. Kuluni, a little excited, but quietly asked about what happened. Not a muscle moved in Alucia's face, and she said that as soon as she gave the signal, Hembritz immediately rushed into battle. At first he aimed for the teacher's throat, but he quickly turned his sword and attacked in a different way. Hembritz leaned back a bit and attacked from the side. Alucia explained that Hembritz instantly made a horizontal cut at the teacher's exposed torso, but the teacher parried it. Their swords clashed, and Beryl grabbed the hilt of Hembritz's sword. After this, Hembril fell to the ground. Alucia explained that Hembritz lost his balance and the teacher immediately struck him in the neck. Beryl's face was impassive at that moment. Kuluni gasped excitedly and asked how he did it so quickly, literally in the blink of an eye. Meanwhile, the fight between Beryl and Hembritz continued. Hembritz swung his sword and attacked Beryl, but Beryl blocked his blow and a very loud crack was heard. Beryl then struck Hembritz in the face. Hembritz looked scared. The blow sent Hembritz reeling back, and the mark of the blow was already visible on his cheek. Beryl became wary. When Hembritz covered his face with his hand, Beryl immediately began to apologize to him, saying that he did not want this. Hembritz, with tears in his eyes, said that there was nothing terrible in this, and his gaze was directed at Beryl. Hembritz thought that this guy really could see. Beryl asked again, a little worried, if he was sure he was okay. Kuluni closed her eyes in fear and pressed her hands to her chest. Alucia only grinned slightly and, looking at Beryl, thought that the main factor of the teacher's unrivaled strength was his eyes. She recalled their fight, and thought about how he had a keen eye for his opponent's breathing, his steps, his center of gravity, his grip, and his fencing. Those eyes could detect even the smallest gap the size of a needle's eye. She also recalled Beryl's strikes and dodges, thinking that he had an all-seeing sword honed to the limit. Hembritz had an angry look. The knights around him were talking in shock about how Beryl had won again, and how the vice commander was so helpless against him. Hembritz imagined himself with blood running down his temples and shin, and many deep wounds on his body. He wondered how many times he would have ended his life if this were a real sword. At one point, Beryl looked down and was a little scared. Hembritz attacked Beryl's legs, but Beryl quickly dodged and raised his legs so that the blow did not hit him. He thought that he could still continue. Suddenly, Hembritz planted his foot firmly on the ground and thought that he could show this technique. And when he first used it, even the commander couldn't see it. Hembril swung his sword and began to spin quickly. Beryl looked at Hembril warily and a little confused. Kuluni screamed in fear that this was it. Beryl's eyes widened slightly. It was the twisting slash. Beryl watched Hembritz and thought about how he was hiding his hands behind his back, making it hard for his opponent to know what was coming next. Standing on one leg, Hembritz holds his other hand behind the hilt, and then his sword accelerates thanks to centrifugal force in his superior muscles. With this, he is able to completely destroy the enemy's defense. His gaze was confident. Hembritz turned around very quickly and delivered a crushing attack, but Beryl ran behind Hembritz with the same speed, dodging his sword. When Beryl was already behind Hembritz, he lightly hit him on the head with his sword. Hembritz was already sweating all over, and his look was very furious and displeased. Hembritz fell to the ground, turning to Beryl. Kuluni and Alucia were inspired and smiled, while the others were in shock. Hembritz looked at Beryl in shock and fear, thinking that he was a real professional. Before that, Alucia had fought Hembritz and was able to defeat him. Others felt sorry for the vice commander, saying that if it weren't for Alucia, he could have become their commander. After the victory, Alucia asked Hembritz if he had a strange feeling. Hembritz, sitting on the ground and sweating, said that he did, and that when he fought her, he felt as if they were looking in different directions. Alucia watched the fight between Beryl and Hembritz without any emotion. And in her memories, someone asked her why she decided to become a knight. Hembritz and Beryl's swords collided with a loud sound. Suddenly, a cracking sound was heard. Beryl deftly knocked Hembritz to the ground, striking his sword very quickly. Hembritz grunted loudly and clenched his teeth as he struggled to keep the sword above him. Beryl frowned as he looked at Hembritz, when suddenly a loud popping sound was heard. Beryl looked away to the source of the sound. When he looked up, he noticed that everyone around him was clapping enthusiastically. Beryl was a little surprised, and Hembritz began to rise from the ground. All the knights clapped with a satisfied smile, and Cluny was very happy. Alucia raised her hand and said that this was enough. After some time, they came to a cafe with a bar. Cluny was holding a wooden mug with an alcoholic drink in her hand. She coughed into her fist and began to say something in honor of the appointment of teacher Beryl as their instructor. Beryl was sitting with Alucia, Cluny, and someone else at the same table. They raised their mugs and clinked them, smiling and saying that they would drink to this. Alucia lifted the mug of drink to her lips and began to drink it, taking loud gulps. Beryl watched her silently. After that, Alucia took one skewer of meat and took one piece with her teeth. She carefully removed it from the skewer and began to chew. Afterwards, she drank the drink from her mug again and exhaled, leaving foam on her lips. Suddenly she looked at Beryl and made an awkward noise. Beryl, with a slight grin, called out to her briefly and offered her another drink. Alucia blushed deeply and began to stutter. She held the mug in her hands with a very awkward look. Cluny said with a sly smile that their Alucia always behaved like that. Alucia angrily called out to her. Beryl smiled, tears welling up in his eyes as he thought that no one would have ever thought that the day would come when he would be drinking with his students. When Beryl raised his mug to his lips and wanted to drink more, he was a little surprised when he realized that his mug was empty. Blushing, Alucia took the bottle and was about to offer to pour him another, but suddenly someone else approached them and held out a bottle of drink. Beryl turned around. It was Hembritz. He was offering Beryl a drink with a polite smile. Beryl thanked Hembritz. He held out his mug, and Hembritz began pouring him a drink. Beryl said he was sorry they had to have a banquet. Hembritz told him not to worry about it. Alucia, disgruntled, thought she wanted to pour for the teacher too. There was a lot of delicious food on the tables, and mugs were filled with alcoholic drinks. Hembritz said that many people wanted to thank Beryl today, including himself. Hembritz looked at Beryl with the same smile, saying that he also wanted to grovel before him, and asked to allow him to make amends for his guilt. After a while, Hembritz put his mug down on the table with a very loud bang and said very loudly that Beryl had made a great impression on him. Beryl called out to him a little awkwardly. Hembritz said he was ashamed that he had not believed him at first. Then he began to apologize for his temper and his hot temper. The girl said he was always like that when he drank a lot. Beryl quietly said that everything was fine. Alucia smiled very contentedly, raising the mug to her lips, and said that she had told him that the teacher was much stronger than her. Alcohol certainly made its way. One of the girls asked what the teacher thought of Hembritz after the duel with him. Beryl, bringing food to his mouth, said that he was quite strong, and his hands had such strength that they were beyond human. Hembritz covered his mouth, a little embarrassed. Beryl recalled their fight and said that his spinning strike forced him to stand on one leg so he couldn't properly dodge or counterattack, and if he decided to take it head-on, he would break his sword, which is a good technique. Hembritz had a visible light blush on his cheeks. He looked away and thought about how Beryl had analyzed so much in such a short moment. Beryl twirled his fork a bit and said that he also thought that if he had gotten hit even once, he would have definitely lost. So he had no choice but to dodge and get to his back. Recalling the fight, Beryl told Hembritz to remember that if someone managed to dodge his spin kick, then it would be able to hit his blind spot, and so he should think about what to do at such a moment. Hembritz jumped up and bowed to Beryl from the waist. Beryl trembled a little and looked at Hembritz in surprise. Beryl awkwardly asked what had happened and if he had drunk too much. Hembritz, looking at the floor, called out to Beryl. The fair-haired boy, without getting up, said that Beryl was needed by their knightly order, and then asked him to become their instructor. Beryl was surprised and looked at Hembritz with wide eyes. He thought that Hembritz was a young knight, but already so strong. Afterwards, he thought that he shouldn't do such stupid things, and putting his hand on his shoulder, he agreed with a smile and said that he hoped that they could get along. Hembry raised his head and said with a smile that it was like a dream and that he couldn't believe that he could see, with his own eyes, the master of the sword from the hinterland. Beryl stood in a stupor, asking him what he was talking about. When Hembrit sat down and started drinking again, Beryl asked him who this sword master from the hinterlands was. Suddenly, Kaluni told the teacher that Alucia was eating her shashlik. Alucia said that was mean, and she was actually going to order more. It was already deep night outside, and the stars were visible in the sky. The light came only from the windows and street lamps. Alucia was sitting on a bench. She exhaled tiredly. Looking at her pigtail, she thought about how she ended up getting drunk in front of the teacher, and that he probably thought she was a loose woman. She pressed her pigtail to her lips and looked away, wondering if perhaps she had let her guard down too much because her plans were going well. She remembered Beryl telling Hembritz that if someone could dodge his spin kick, they could hit his blind spot. She thought he said it as if it was easy to do. She recalled her fight with Hembritz. When Hembritz first used this move during a duel, she was able to dodge it, but it cost her the loss of her training sword. She raised her head and looked at him with a smile. She thought that the teacher was as great as always. The girl remembered the moment when Beryl gave her the sword. She asked what it was. Beryl told her that the sword was his parting gift, and that he always gave them to children who were able to learn all of his techniques. After that, Beryl said that he had nothing more to teach her. Alucia said loudly and excitedly that this was not true. Her eyes were filled with incomprehension. She said confidently that she was still unable to approach his skill, so she disagreed with him. Beryl stepped aside and said that she was overestimating him. Beryl turned around and scratched the back of his head and said that she was an excellent swordsman, so she shouldn't waste any more time in the dojo, which was in the middle of nowhere. Alucia was excited and a little upset. As she watched Beryl leave, she wondered why he thought of himself like that. He was an incredible person. After some time, she left Beryl's house. And that day, she had a plan. It became the purpose of her life. Sometime later, in the city, two guys were standing on the balcony of the training hall. They were looking at the people in the hall and talking about how there are a lot of candidates this year, but few of them will pass. They noticed Alucia standing below. One of the boys asked if she was the girl who had won first place in the written exam. Looking at her, they noticed that she was very young and said that at her age, she shouldn't even drink alcohol. In front of the crowd of people in the hall stood a man who held a roll of paper in his hands. He said that first, they would fight one-on-one among themselves, and then those who were chosen would fight a duel with the instructor. After some time, Alucia was paired with a fair-haired guy. The guy was already in a fighting stance, and Alucia was calmly looking at him. The start of the fight was announced. The guy began to attack Alucia with a loud sigh. She stood still. Suddenly, Alucia's gaze changed, and she opened her eyes wide, not understanding what was wrong. The guy attacked her, but Alucia dodged, and jumping up, swung her sword. She thought that he was very slow. Looking at the surprised boy, she thought about how people had said that all these candidates were simply incredible, even the instructor from the order himself. After a while, everyone looked at them in amazement, the mouths open. The blonde guy was lying on the ground, and Alucia was standing calmly next to him. She thought that he was the strongest knight in the kingdom. Afterwards, she frowned and barely visible tears appeared in her eyes. She confidently believed that none of them could compare to the teacher, Alucia Citrus, having set a new record in the entrance exam and proven herself to be an incredible knight. She was immediately accepted into the order, becoming a young commander. After some time, Alucia asked someone in surprise if he really wanted her to become an instructor. The person with her confirmed it. Across from Alucia sat a man who said that no one else was suitable for the role. He then added that he understood that with her duties as a commander, she did not have much time, but he would still like it. She lowered her head and smiled, thinking that she had been waiting for this. Then she said that she would gladly accept his offer. Remembering Beryl, she said that there was someone who was more suitable for this role than she. Then she asked if he could listen to her. The reason she became a knight was because she wanted to set the stage for the teacher. After remembering everything she had gone through, the girl ran her hand over the blade of her sword, thinking that he might think that this was too much, that she was a bossy and selfish girl. Alucia closed her eyes. She felt very sorry for not having ambitions like the other knights. She hugged her sword, thinking that no one would ever know his true skill, making her feel heavy at heart. Opening her eyes, another memory came to her. Once upon a time, a girl sat under a tree, hugging her knees. Beryl walked slowly towards her, saying that the other child had gotten off with only a bruise, and they would put something cold on it and it would gradually go away. Alucia covered her face with her hands. Beryl approached her, saying that it was just an accident, so she should go back. Eyes were filled with tears, which were running down her cheeks. She quietly said that she was very sorry. Looking at Beryl, she began to apologize, and said that now she could not show him her face, and that it was her fault. Beryl sat down slowly on the other side of the tree and called out to Alucia. He asked her if she needed a handkerchief, and then handed it to her. Alucia reached for it, a little hesitantly. Beryl looked ahead with a slight smile on her face and said that he was glad she was not hurt. Alucia quietly asked what he was talking about. Beryl explained that he didn't mean that the boy from the other dojo was injured. That was fine. But when it came to his students, as long as they were safe, he was calm. Beryl closed his eyes with a sincere smile. Beryl tightly and cried loudly. After these memories of the past, Alucia stood up from the bench, also looking at the sky. She thought that from now on, her teacher's path as a sword master was just beginning. Alucia sincerely thought that he would open a new era, and in the near future he would be called a sword master. After some time, Beryl came to his room and lay down on the bed. He tiredly said that he had drunk too much. A huge library, with an equally huge number of books and a small sofa in the center of the room. Someone greeted Fissel and asked if she had heard already. There were 2 girls in the library. One of them was sitting on a small sofa and said that the vice commander of the knights had been defeated in a duel. Afterwards, she felt sorry for him. The second girl took books, saying that she had never heard of it before. Afterwards, the dark-haired girl asked who he had fought and whether his opponent had been the commander. The fair-haired girl said that it had not been so, and if she was not mistaken, it had been the new instructor, supposedly a master of the hinterland. The dark-haired girl froze and turned around, asking if it was the swordmaster from the hinterland. The blonde girl said it was. The dark-haired girl asked if it was Beryl Sensei. It was a bright day. There were many people walking around the city. Someone said that they were now in the western part of the city, and that they had a shopping district there. And there were also many shops there, so he would be able to find something to his taste. She then added that there was a lot of fighting here, so they had knights patrolling the area 24 hours a day. Beryl asked if she really didn't mind him coming with her. Kaluni told him that it was true, and he should trust her. A little earlier, Beryl told everyone that they would end things here, and that everyone had done a good job today. Beryl sat down on the floor in the hall. Kaluni sat next to him and asked if he had gotten used to the city yet. Beryl said that he hardly went anywhere, so he didn't know much about it. Kaluni agreed, because he came to train them every day. Hembritz, who was standing next to them, asked if he knew that they had a lot of popular places here. Beryl, a little surprised, said that he had come quite a long way to this city, so it wouldn't hurt for him to see all of it. Kaluni extended her hands and asked Beryl what he thought about walking around the city with her while she was on duty. After some time, Kaluni brought Beryl to a market where there were a lot of people. She said that this was the biggest market. After that, she pointed somewhere and said that here he could buy everything he needed, and that she often shops here. Beryl stood in a slight stupor and thought that there were too many shops here, and he didn't even know where to start. Middle-aged country bumpkin. Kaluni held the dress to herself and asked him what he thought of it. She was all beaming with happiness, and Beryl grinned a little and turned his head away, thinking that she was very young. After some time, Beryl passed by a girl in a cloak, and she still had her hood on. She turned to him and asked if he was Beryl. Beryl turned around, looking at the girl. Beryl looked at the girl a little confused, and Kaluni greeted the girl with delight, calling her as Fist-chan. Beryl wondered if she knew her. The girl smiled slightly and said that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. He thoughtfully took his chin and looked at the girl. She said that he was hurting her. Suddenly, Beryl noticed her sword. The girl took off her hood, and Beryl realized it was Fissel. The girl said that it was. The girl rubbed her eyes and said that when he didn't recognize her, he hurt her. Beryl felt awkward and began to apologize to her. Fissel was a very quiet child, and she rarely interacted with other children. Beryl often saw her practicing her sword strikes alone. After she had mastered all of his techniques, and he had given her a sword as a parting gift, she told him that she would now move on. After that, she left the dojo. Kaluni took the girl by the shoulders and said that she and the teacher wanted to see the local sights, then invited her to go with them. Fissel said that she did not mind, because it had been a long time since she had seen the teacher. They were walking through the market, and Kaluni asked Fissel what she was doing in the city. Fissel told her that she would answer, but Kaluni had to make a surprised face. Kaluni answered that she understood, and added that Fissel was very amazing. After that, Kaluni asked if Beryl knew that she was considered a master in the magic division. Fissel tensed up and her cheeks turned a little red. Beryl would be very surprised by this. He asked if this meant that she could use magic. Fissel confirmed this, then said that he could praise her. The magic division. Its members are all exclusively mages, but they are quite rare in their world. Just like the Knights of Leberis, they help maintain power in the kingdom. Beryl looked away and thought that he thought she would continue to learn the way of the sword. He looked at Fissel and thought that he had trained another incredible child. Fissel quietly asked him to praise her. Beryl looked at the ring thoughtfully. Fissel said that the ring could create a small flame. Beryl told her that he would buy one for himself. Kaluni put the necklace on herself and said that she glowed. After this, Fissel took the earring and, sighing, said that it was cursed. Beryl and Kaluni looked at her in fear. The saleswoman scratched her head and asked if she really had found the cursed item, since they hadn't been found here for a long time. Fissel handed the saleswoman a coin and said that she would buy the earring. The saleswoman refused and said that she did not have to pay and that she could just take it. Fissel put the earring in a bag. Beryl and Kaluni asked if she would be okay if she carried it with her. Fissel said that she wasn't going to wear it and the curse wouldn't work unless its conditions were met. Beryl and Kaluni asked how it appeared. Fissel explained that there could be different reasons, such as bloodlust, and some people create them on purpose to make mages look bad. After Fissel took Beryl by the wrist and said that for this reason, she was giving it to him. Beryl watched the girl's actions with a little confusion. Now Beryl had a bracelet of calm on his wrist. She said that he gets very tired during training with the knights, and if he has this bracelet on, he will be able to recover much faster. Fissel smiled slightly and asked Beryl to tell people that magic exists in their world to help. Beryl clenched his fist and closed his eyes, thinking that she was just a wonderful child. Fissel scratched Kaluni and said that next time she would give her something. Beryl thought that she had become such a great mage, but he was a little sad that he would not see her wield a sword anymore. Suddenly, he heard some sounds, and Beryl turned around warily. Two masked guys were running along the sidewalk. One of the guys pushed the girl, who was screaming that he was a thief and asking to be caught. Beryl raised his hand and noticed that there were two of them. But suddenly, Fissel blocked his way and said that she would do everything herself, and he could just watch. Kaluni looked at Fissel, a little indignantly, and said that it was her job. Fissel picked up her sword and swung it. She looked very confident. Beryl was surprised that she was using a sword and wondered if she was planning on using magic. Fissel tightened her grip on the hilt. Lightning sparked around her, and dust flew off Fissel across the ground. Her expression remained unwavering. She attacked the thieves. Although she used magic, she did it with a sword. Beryl watched the situation in surprise and thought that he was hit by something. He looked at Fissel, who skillfully controlled the sword. He thought that this was her magic. One of the thieves that Fissel attacked fell to the ground, and the other one hissed and ran on. Someone shouted that he ran into the alley, and Fissel said with a serious look that she understood. She walked forward, and her sword made a cracking sound. She jumped up with a loud sound, and the people nearby covered themselves from the flying stones. The thief ran down the alley, and Fissel skillfully pushed off the walls of buildings, quickly following him. After that, she attacked him, and he fell to the ground with a groan. Fissel put away her sword and also looked at him with a serious expression. After that, Kaluni lifted the boy onto her shoulder and exhaled. She dragged the two thieves forward and said that she would take them. Beryl looked at Kaluni with a little surprise, saying that everything was fine. In his mind, he wondered if all the knights in the order had such strength. Fissel looked at Beryl calmly. She asked him how he liked her skill. Beryl said it was incredible, then asked if that was her magic. Fissel explained that it was a sort of magic and that she enhanced her blade with magic. She added that her commander said that she was the best at it. Beryl thought that this was indeed an incredible technique and that no matter how long her sword was, her attack would reach its target. Beryl never thought that she could strengthen his sword technique like this. Now he wanted to meet her magic teacher. Fissel laughed contentedly. Fissel said that the commander of her division taught her the magic sword, and also, when she told her about Beryl, she also said that she would like to meet him. She turned around but continued to look at Beryl. She said with a sincere smile that they were very similar. After some time, it was night, but the lights were still on in the windows of the building. Beryl looked at the bracelet on his arm and said that after she put it on his shoulders, stopped hurting. He was still walking past the houses, and the smile never left his face. He thought about how one of his students was the commander of the order, and another was an incredible mage. He couldn't even know that all of them would be able to climb so high up the career ladder. He was in a narrow alley where there were no people at all. Beryl frowned a little and put his hands on his cheeks, squeezing them a little. His eyes were tired. He forced himself not to think like that, and that he should praise his students for putting in so much effort in achieving all this. But he, on the contrary, had achieved nothing and was just an ordinary old man. Suddenly he noticed some flash and raised his head towards the source of light. Beryl stopped and saw a bright light coming from something in the distance. He wondered what it was, but then realized it was fire. Suddenly he saw the silhouette of a girl who was completely ablaze with fire, and even her eyes. Beryl was a little scared and alert. He quickly covered himself with his hand. The girl put her hand to the side and, waving it, attacked Beryl sharply. Beryl got into a fighting stance and grabbed his sword as the attack came at him. The fire, like an angry bird, flew straight at Beryl, but he quickly jumped up and covered himself with his hands as the flames flared up behind him. He attacked the flaming stranger. Beryl cut off her head with a sharp movement and looked at her warily. The stranger's head immediately began to grow back. Beryl asked in surprise if it was magic. Someone with long hair in the shadows raised his hand and looked at the bracelet, then looked surprised at something. Bright flashes flashed in the narrow alley. Beryl attacked the flaming stranger again, this time cutting off her legs and an arm. He looked at this girl and thought that this was a flame doll created with magic, and that no matter how many times he attacked her, she would still recover. He sighed heavily. Beryl ran away from her, and the fire doll flew after him. Beryl looked at her, thinking that it was great that she was chasing him. Beryl remembered Fissel's words that using spells at long range is not very effective, and it greatly exhausts the mage. Therefore, it is better to use a bow and arrow for this. Beryl ran out into the open, empty area and walked towards the center. He looked around, thinking that whoever was controlling this fiery doll was probably somewhere nearby, and that there would definitely be nowhere for him to hide. Someone came out onto the platform, and Beryl became wary. It was a girl with long blonde hair. She said that he was quite a brave man and made her come out of hiding. She looked at Beryl with a sly grin. Beryl was very shocked and did not understand what was happening. He asked if it was a child. The girl angrily and discontentedly asked who he called the child and whether he really didn't respect his elders. She raised her hand and asked if he was the sword master from the hinterland. She then said that he had managed to escape her magic and that she now believed that he had defeated the Roaring Blade. Beryl frowned and asked again about the Roaring Blade. The girl said that she was talking about the vice commander of the knightly order. Beryl realized that she was talking about Himbritz and that he had a very cute nickname. The girl clenched her fist and said that she had her own reasons for that. The girl sharply pointed her hand in his direction and said seriously that she had come for his life. Beryl looked at the girl a little uncomprehendingly. Beryl, looking at the girl, thought that it was bad to joke with her, but something was clearly wrong here. The girl looked questioningly at Beryl and asked why he was silent, and whether he had swallowed his tongue. Suddenly, Beryl was in complete shock, and his eyes widened as he looked at the bracelet on the girl's hand. He told her about the bracelet, and at first she did not understand him. Then she looked at her hand and understood what he was talking about. The girl looked at Beryl again and said that she had recently taken him from a girl, and although she was a mage, she used a sword. She smiled broadly and asked mockingly what was wrong and why he was so angry when he saw this trinket. Beryl was very angry, and his eyes were blazing with rage. He asked very seriously where she was now. The girl looked at Beryl angrily, saying that he had such a beautiful face now. The blonde girl spread her arms out to the sides, and many swords rushed at him. She herself told him to try to make her talk. Beryl quickly reacted and moved his leg. He stood up in such a way that not a single sword hit him. Suddenly, a huge ice ball formed above him and rushed towards him. Beryl swung his sword and skillfully cut it in two. That huge block cracked and then broke into pieces with a loud sound. The girl was very surprised when she saw a completely whole Beryl. She thought about how she had been aiming for his blind spot. Beryl was squatting, looking at the girl and asked if it was lightning. The girl laughed very evilly and loudly and said that he was really amazing. The girl continued to attack Beryl, but he skillfully dodged her attacks. Beryl looked at the girl and thought about how he couldn't get close to her because she was using too many different spells. At this rate, he would have to defend himself all the time, and he would get exhausted. Beryl grinned evilly, thinking that she wouldn't be able to use magic all the time, since it too should have its own limit. He remembered that when a mage has less mana, the power of his spells also decreases. Beryl turned, looking at the fair-haired girl, thinking that now the question was, who would tire faster? The girl waved her hand and asked if this was a battle of attrition, then added that she was happy about it. The girl summoned the water doll. The girl said she wasn't done yet, then asked if he understood. Seeing the doll, Beryl became wary and frowned. The water doll descended to the ground. A stream of water with a very strong current suddenly rushed towards Beryl. The whole area was filled with water up to his knees. Beryl looked at the girl, thinking that there was water everywhere and that it was bad. The girl smiled widely and maliciously, and said that now she would not run away. She waved her hand again and attacked him. He staggered back a little from the attack but was still standing on his feet. After that, the stranger summoned the new doll and asked him what he would say about it. The girl squeezed the magic between her palms, and Beryl's gaze was filled with fear. The blonde girl opened her palms. She made a small magic ball which she threw towards Beryl. When the ball hit the water, it immediately began to react violently. The girl asked him with a slight mockery if he could survive it. Beryl raised his sword and frowned at what was happening. Suddenly there was a very loud explosion. When water comes into contact with another substance at high temperatures, it boils and a phreatic eruption occurs. The stranger watched contentedly. But suddenly she said that, under the influence of the moment, she had overdone it. Suddenly, Beryl emerged from the huge cloud of smoke, with a very angry look in his eyes. The stranger was very surprised. Beryl thought that it was dangerous, and that he should not hesitate when the magic ball rushed towards him. Beryl swung his sword very quickly and thrust it into the ground, cutting a triangular piece out of it, which he used as a protective wall, hiding behind it. The blonde girl gritted her teeth, smiling very widely. She spread her arms out to the sides, stepping down a few steps. Beryl's eyes widened, and he pushed off the ground sharply, jumping to the side. Beryl landed, squatted down, and looked at the girl. He wondered what was wrong with her. The girl turned her gaze to Beryl. He thought that if she continued to attack him, he would definitely lose to her. The girl exhaled very loudly and said that it was enough. She turned her head away and said that if he could survive even this, then she definitely could not oppose anything to him. Then she added that this is what Fissel had told her. Beryl looked at the girl with an uncomprehending expression. He asked what she was talking about and whether she really knew her name. The girl smiled and said that of course she knew him. After all, she was the one who taught her magic. The girl placed her hand on her chest and said that her name was Lucy Diamond. Beryl asked in surprise if she was the commander and thought that she was the most powerful mage in the kingdom. The girl said that she was the commander of the magic division. A girl and a man stood near a huge hole in the ground. The man said it was too dangerous and she would be turned down anyway if she asked them to use it only for training. The girl calmly said that she thought so. The man apologized to her for this and said that he was afraid to imagine what would happen if rumors started to spread about it. The girl, without much emotion, said that everything was as usual. She raised her hand to her chin and said that even this spell would never see the light of day, and that it made her very sad. It was all a memory of Lucy. She leaned her elbows on the partition and said with a smile that she only used it because Fissel said you could resist her magic. Beryl was very angry and did not understand what was happening. The blonde girl said he was weird because even when his life was in danger, he continued to fight the fire doll. She asked if he realized that most mages aren't killers. Beryl's eyes were filled with fury and he asked her why she had started all this then. Lucy felt a little awkward and said that she thought that if she didn't do it, he wouldn't take her seriously. Lucy made a very innocent face and started apologizing to him for that, and said that even she wanted to look cool in front of Fissel from time to time. Suddenly, they heard voices. Someone shouted that they had heard sounds from there. Beryl and Lucy looked towards the source of the sound. Someone loudly asked why everything was frozen. Lucy said that it was bad. She loudly told Beryl to get out of there quickly. Beryl asked, a little annoyed, who would clean up then? Lucy told him not to worry, and that the ice was made by magic, so it would melt quickly. After some time, morning came. Everyone greeted Beryl and he reciprocated. He walked along the corridor and suddenly called out to Fizzle. The girl turned around and realized that it was Beryl-sensei. They bowed to each other, and Fizzle greeted her. Beryl thanked Fizzle for the bracelet and that it had helped him a lot. Then he asked her what business she had come here for. Fizzle showed Beryl a small bottle. She said she came here for the potions and that the magic division creates them, and she came here to deliver it. Beryl said he saw the knights using it. The girl was holding 3 boxes of potions in her hands. Beryl extended his hand and asked if she was in trouble. Then he offered to help her. Fizzle looked at Beryl questioningly. Afterward, she gave him the boxes, but Beryl couldn't lift them with his body shaking. She said that she usually used magic to carry these potions. Beryl asked a little awkwardly if she could help him a little then. After some time, they were already walking along a different, spacious corridor. Fizzle asked if Commander Lucy really did that. Beryl said that it meant that she really was the commander of their division, then added that she was a child. Fizzle said that the commander once told her that she had used magic to stop her body from aging, so no one knew exactly how old she really was, and that it could be assumed that she was older than both of them. Fizzle's gaze was very serious. She confidently said that although Lucy looked like a child, she was undoubtedly the most powerful magician in the world. Fizzle said that Lucy knew about all the magic on the continent, and it could be said that she was the embodiment of magic itself, and that was why their state controlled it. Beryl thought that he was lucky to be alive. After Beryl came to the conclusion that the chances of him meeting her again were extremely small. Beryl looked at Fizzle and said that he would go to Alucia's office. Fizzle thanked Beryl for his help. Entering Alucia's office, he saw Alucia, Lysander, and Lucy sitting around the table. Lucy smiled and called out to Fizzle, asking if that meant she was with Beryl. Alucia smiled slightly and thanked Fizzle for her work, while Lysander excitedly exclaimed that she and the teacher had not seen each other for a long time. Beryl smiled a little nervously and thought about how he had met her again and why it had happened. He stood in the doorway and wondered what they were all doing here, then nervously asked if he should leave. Alucia smiled and told him to stay. Lucy turned around and twirled her finger and said that they had just been talking about him. Beryl, a little surprised, asked if they had really been talking about him. Beryl walked forward and Lucy offered him a seat with her, but Beryl refused with a serious face. Then she asked how much it was and whether he thought she would bite him. Alucia looked at them a little angrily and wondered what was going on, and whether they already knew each other. Lysandra was also angry and was tormented by the question of how they knew each other. Beryl asked what was going on and wondered if it was because of what he had done. Lysander raised her hand and said that she personally wanted to ask him for a favor. She said that in order to train new adventurers, she wanted to ask for his help. Beryl asked, a little confused, if she wanted him to train them. Lysander said that there was a group of newbie adventurers who recently took on a quest to conquer a dungeon. Beryl asked about the dungeon in shock. Lysander explained that on the adventurer's side, they needed to be accompanied by someone of platinum rank or higher, but she was currently the only one who could do so. Alucia said with displeasure that she said that one experienced adventurer would be enough. Lysander confirmed this, but there was a problem. She continued that there was a chance that they would encounter an unknown monster. Lucy thought about it and said that there was also a request from the Magic Division to investigate this dungeon, and it was said that some mysterious magical power was coming from it. Lysander added that the chances of them running into an unknown monster were slim, but the guild had decided to send 2 experienced adventurers on this mission just in case, and that was why she wanted to ask them to go with her. Beryl smiled slightly and agreed to go with her. Alucia looked at Beryl a little surprised. Beryl asked Alucia if he could leave the training grounds for a while. Alucia, a little disappointed, said yes, and that she thought there would be no problem. Beryl turned to Lysander, saying that she had helped him so many times before, but he was not sure that he could be of any use. Lysander bowed to Beryl and thanked him loudly. Beryl said that in that case, they would meet at the guild. Lucy called out to Fizzle and said that if she was not busy, she should go to the guild with her now. Fizzle looked at Lucy a little uncomprehendingly. There they would be able to see something interesting. After a while, they were already walking down the corridor. Alucia said that it was unexpected and that she was sure that he would refuse her. He said that before he would most likely refuse her. He scratched his head awkwardly and said that after she asked him to be an instructor, he'd regained his confidence. He said it was all thanks to her. She covered her mouth awkwardly and asked him to be careful. Adventurers, individuals who are members of a guild and whose powers are not limited by national borders. Traveling the world on behalf of the guild is a dream job, with requests ranging from finding lost items to slaying monsters. Adventurers are divided into classes according to their strength and abilities, and the class determines how important quests they can take. Black, Ocean, Platinum, Gold, Silver, Bronze, and at the very bottom, White. The highest rank is Black. Its owner is able to protect an entire country. In the Kingdom of Leberis, there is such a person, and this is Shorna Lysander, the owner of the Black rank. 20 years ago, Beryl found her near the riverbank and decided to take her in. It seems that they were attacked by a monster, and she was the only one who survived. At first, she was very afraid of him, and she couldn't even remember her name. But one day, something happened. Lysander came out to Beryl on the street, and he squatted down and handed her a sword, asking if she wanted to try holding it or not. She said her name was Shirena. Beryl thought that she was no longer that scared little girl, but now she was a famous hero. Beryl wondered sharply whether he was really going to continue to allow her to pay for his accommodation. Landred was a platinum ranker, and it looked like he had reached great heights. It was very light outside, and the flag on top of the roof was fluttering in the wind. In a spacious office at the table sat a man with a beard. He closed his eyes and said that they were waiting for them. The man stood up and said that he was the guildmaster of the Leberis branch, Nidus. He then pointed to his assistant and said that his name was Maigan. Maigan introduced himself to the guest. Maigan looked at Beryl a little angrily and warily. Beryl looked away a little awkwardly and wondered why he was looking at him like that. Beryl and Lysander sat down opposite Nidus. Nidus said that he had heard about him from Shorna and Lucy, and he understood that Beryl was there to help them. Beryl said that was true, and that he hoped he could do so. Nidus said that since even the commander of the magic division spoke so well of him, he would definitely be able to help them. His assistant sternly asked him to wait a little before making a decision. Maigan apologized for his words, and then said that even if Shorna and Lucy advised him, he was still against a stranger going into the dungeon. Lysander looked at the assistant a little angrily and asked if he wanted to say that he didn't trust her teacher. Beryl didn't know what to do with herself in such a situation. The assistant said that the problem was different. Maigan explained that he was worried that Beryl might be seriously injured or even end her life. The assistant continued that in their guild, the most important thing is trust, and if they allowed a civilian to enter the dungeon and he ended up dying there, then due to rumors, they would lose people's trust in their guild. Maigan turned to Beryl and said seriously that it was impolite of him to ask such a thing, but he was interested in whether he had experience fighting in dungeons. Beryl was slightly stunned by this question. Beryl looked down and said yes, and that he had been in one once. The girls looked at Beryl a little confused. The assistant kept looking at him and asked what had happened. Beryl said that without defeating any monsters, he ran to the exit, and his confidence was gone. Lucy asked him what happened next. Beryl quietly said that he never went in there again, and that he was scared. Lucy asked if he was a child. Lucy asked if he was a child. The assistant said with a slight grin that if it was as he said, then he was just a newbie, so Maigan wasn't sure if they should trust him with the lives of their people. Lysander glared at him, saying that a teacher was not someone who would die so easily. The assistant sternly told her that they would not find out here. Beryl had only one thing in mind, so that they would not quarrel over him. Lucy smirked and said she understood. She sat back on the couch and asked if that meant he just had to demonstrate at least platinum rank skill. Lucy turned her gaze to Beryl and asked what would happen if he was on the same level as a black rank, and if they would object more then. The assistant looked questioningly at Beryl, and Nidus said that everything was clear to him. Beryl and Lysander were brought out onto the field. Someone said loudly that this was a battle between the double blade of the dragon and the mysterious man. People around began to place bets and look for their places. Beryl was mentally angry at Lucy, remembering that she had said that he needed to fight Lysander so that they could learn about his power. And everyone had supported this idea. Lysander smiled and waved her sword, saying that no one would have thought she could fight him, and that her heart was pounding wildly. Beryl mentally begged her to stop it. Megan, Nidas, and Lucy were sitting at a separate table. Fissel approached Lucy and said that she had brought her a drink. Lucy pointed to an empty chair and told her with a smile that she had saved a place for her. Fissel sat down and asked if that was what she meant when she said she would see something interesting. Lucy waved her hands and said that was it, then asked if she didn't like it. The assistant turned his attention to them. He asked seriously if she had expected this outcome from the start. Lucy put on an innocent face and asked how she was supposed to know. Nidas chuckled and said that Megan would never defeat her. The assistant took a sip of his drink and said that he didn't mind, because they just wanted to measure his strength. Beryl and Lysander took up fighting stances, and the assistant said that he was even interested in how he would fight against a black rank. The highest rank an adventurer can reach is ocean. Those are the words he heard. The only one higher is black. Those are the words he heard. Many people joined the guild with the hope of reaching it, but no one thought about reaching the black rank. Everyone who reached the rank of ocean was incredibly happy. All this is because if you have a black rank, it means that you are no longer human. Beryl and Lysander stood opposite each other. Someone loudly asked if he was the only one who would bet on this guy. Others wondered how much they could win if he could win. The man who had bet on Beryl loudly asked him to win, and the others shut him up. Beryl clenched his teeth in displeasure and anger. He mentally asked them to shut up and let him concentrate, compared to his other students, not to mention Kaluni, who was somewhere, or Alucia, who was too busy to come to training. Lysander is definitely on another level. She looked very menacing. Fissel said without much emotion that it was starting, and Lucy said with a grin that it was very exciting. Lysander jumped up and said that she was starting. Lysander suddenly charged at Beryl. She swung her sword and Beryl's eyes widened, thinking that she was quite fast. Lysander launched a punch, but Beryl managed to block it. She continued to attack him again and again without stopping, but Beryl skillfully dodged her attacks. Her sword passed right past his face, and Beryl watched warily as it happened. After Lysander turned around and swung her sword again, but Beryl dodged it by crouching down. Beryl began to analyze her posture, but then frowned and clearly mentally said no to himself. Lysander swung her sword with a very menacing look. Their fight continued, and Beryl skillfully blocked and dodged her attacks. After that, he grunted and thought warily about how her attacks were not stopping. Beryl dropped to the ground again, dodging another attack. Lucy watched the fight with a smirk and said that Lysander was very fierce, basically, as always. Nidas crossed his arms and said that it looked like it would be a tough sparring match for him. Assistant Megan fought with a stern look. That Lysander San was not a simple dual sword fighter. A few years ago, a dragon appeared from the western side of Liberia, but the knights were too far away, so they had no choice but to announce an emergency mission to destroy the dragon. But they didn't know then that this dragon had the ability to self-heal. His wounds healed very quickly. It was a new kind of monster that they later classified as an immortal dragon. All available ocean rank adventurers had failed to destroy it, and they believed that at this rate, it would wreak havoc on the city. Shirna Lysander was a platinum rank at the time, but she was the one who was able to defeat this dragon. The girl cut through the dragon's flesh very quickly. With incredible speed, she dealt blow after blow, and the dragon simply did not have time to recover, and over time, weakened from loss of blood. Lysander's greatest weapon was her incredible endurance. She looked very stern and menacing. In place of her damaged sword, twin blades were forged from the claw of an immortal dragon, called the Twin Dragons. Meanwhile, the fight continued. Lysander rushed behind Beryl, and he became wary. The girl attacked him sharply from the front, but Beryl was able to dodge, leaning back. He got into a fighting stance, thinking that her attack speed was continuing to increase, and he had no way to attack back, and the only thing he could do was defend against her attacks. The assistant watched the fight silently and with a serious look. But afterward, he asked Lucy if she thought Lysander was holding back. Lucy said she was giving it her all. Fissel agreed with her. Lucy looked at Megan with a smirk and asked him if he thought that Lysander was hiding something from her teacher, or that she wanted to lose to him on purpose. Megan briefly replied that he didn't think so. Lysander pushed off the ground, and the spectators asked if they should stop them. They were told that they couldn't, but the old man could hold on by himself. Beryl blocked Lysander's attack again, gritting his teeth as he did so. Lysander thought that the teacher was truly an incredible person, and that it had been a long time since someone could withstand her attacks. She struck again, but Beryl was able to block it as well. Lysander silently asked Beryl not to fall and lose to her. Beryl sank a little closer to the ground. Lysander swung her sword again, with a very menacing and frightening look, thinking that she just wanted Beryl to surpass her. Beryl was already sweating, but he was still frowning at Lysander. She struck again, and when their swords clashed with a loud sound, Beryl twisted the sword and her arm away. He swung his sword, knocking Lysander's sword out of her hand and throwing it into the air. Lysander was very shocked by this turn of events, while Thistle calmly watched the fight, thinking that Beryl had used the crushing leaf. Originally, it was a simple sword disarming technique. The teacher perfected it, and he decided to use it even though he didn't want to with all his heart. His technique also destroys the opponent's stance. Lysander took up her second sword and attacked Beryl again. He blocked her strike, and after Lysander lost her grip because Beryl used that technique again and twisted her sword. She was a little scared and surprised. Beryl threw her sword aside. Everyone was very surprised and tense. Lysander's look was already very frightened. She smiled nervously and wondered if it was her sword that he had thrown. Beryl used her swords to pin Lysander to the ground and put his sword to her throat. It happened very quickly. Everyone was very shocked, and even Maigen's eyes widened as he watched. After that, Beryl removed his sword from her neck. He said with a smile that she had indeed become very strong and that he was proud of her. Lysander smiled slightly and said that it was not so, and that she still had a long way to go. Beryl stood up and started helping Lysander up. The guy who had bet on Beryl was very happy about his victory, while the others were in complete shock. Suddenly Maigen turned around and headed somewhere. Nidus looked at him and asked him what was going on, confused. Maigen said that he wanted to introduce the newcomers to Gardenant-sama. Everyone exclaimed that it was a great fight. Lucy asked Thistle with a smirk on her face what she thought of their fight. Thistle looked at Lucy. Thistle said that Shounen, the double-blade dragon, is most likely right-handed. She explained that she attacked less with her left hand, using it more as a defense, while her right hand was constantly striking, and that was why the teacher had targeted her left hand. Thistle took a sip from her mug and said it was still hard to believe he could pull off such a thing under her furious blows. Lucy, with a wide smile, said that was an excellent observation, and then called the commander. Lucy went up to Beryl and asked him why he had done all this, and if it was just for fun. Beryl chuckled, shaking the dust off his clothes. Lucy pouted and crossed her arms, saying it was because she hated it. Thistle looked at Lucy and asked if she really hated the teacher. Lucy said that was not true. She narrowed her eyes a little and said that all those who had achieved such mastery should match it. She said that after their battle, they talked for a while. Lucy started to remember their conversation. Lucy said that he was really incredible, since he could resist her magic with a normal sword. But Beryl didn't agree with her. Without turning to her, he said that if she had really wanted to take his life, he would not have been able to save Thistle. Remembering this conversation, Lucy told Thistle that he was not talking about victory or defeat, as if he was holding himself back, as if he was thinking that he had achieved nothing. Lucy held her mug in front of her and frowned as she said that it was just a waste of time to let a master like him idle. She added that he might have spread his name as an instructor in Leberia, but that wouldn't be enough because there were bound to be people somewhere who would need his abilities. While Maigen was talking to Beryl, Lucy confidently said that they should lend a helping hand so that he could become a very famous person. Thistle smiled slightly and agreed with her. Suddenly Thistle's gaze became very angry, and she asked Lucy to remind her what she had said earlier about them making her a hostage, then asked what she meant. Lucy became a little scared and wary. After some time, Beryl was brought to some door. Maigen looked at him and said that they should go there. There were 3 people in the room, 2 young guys and a little girl. They looked confidently at Beryl, but he showed no emotion. A wave of dust and wind swept across the land, causing all the trees to sway. The cause of this wind was a magical animal with the head of a bird and the body of a horse, complete with wings. Meanwhile, Beryl sat with the adventurers inside the carriage, listening to the young adventurers. Then one of them, surprised, asked his friend about Landred Dono becoming a dojo master. That same master sneezed in his own home. One of the adventurers said they were surprised when he decided to retire. They now understood the reason for it. Beryl explained that his father had wanted to become an ocean-rank adventurer, but he had decided to leave. Then the adventurer suggested they visit him, since he'd taught them all before. Beryl awkwardly replied that they could, and that his father would be glad, though in his mind he was imagining his father kicking him out of the house. Beryl was surprised that they all quickly found common ground. Beryl recalled his first encounter with the adventurers. Shurna pointed to the young adventurers, saying they would be going into the dungeon with Beryl. The adventurer confidently introduced himself to Beryl, saying his name was Porta, a bronze-ranked adventurer, and the leader of his group. The short-haired girl standing next to Porta, very nervously and stuttering from excitement, introduced herself, saying that her name was Needly and she also had a bronze rank like Porta. The third adventurer wore a black hooded cloak and a mask. He also had dark circles under his eyes. He introduced himself by saying his name was Salikats, and that he was a silver-ranked adventurer. Porta approached Shurna and Beryl, asking them to shake his hand. Nidley joined him. Shurna shook everyone's hand without saying anything. Porta spoke admiringly to Beryl about his fight with Shurna, to which Beryl awkwardly thanked him. Maigen placed the map on the table and told everyone he wanted to talk about an unidentified monster. He calmly stated that the dungeon they were entering today was one of the places it could inhabit, warning them not to be reckless, as their lives were the most valuable thing. Everyone nodded in agreement, and Sarana asked him where the dungeon was. Maigen replied that it was in Azaramia, Greenwatch Cave. Shurna, Beryl, and the other adventurers arrived in the forest. Shurna immediately told everyone that she and Beryl would be walking behind, so they could keep an eye on the adventurers from behind. Shurna said they would have to go through various difficulties themselves, and they would help them if necessary. Beryl considered the possibility that they might encounter an unidentified monster here. He was different from his past self, he thought. He wouldn't turn his back on monsters and run away anymore. He had to protect these guys now. The three adventurers walked deeper into the cave ahead, and behind them walked Beryl and Shurna. At one point, Beryl slipped and nearly fell, but managed to land on the ground and regain his balance. Shurna approached him, asking if he was okay. Porta advised him to slow down a bit. Beryl apologized to everyone. After this, Porta turned to Salikats, making his intention clear with a glance. Salikats raised his left hand, which held a shining gold ring, and said that all was well and that no one was nearby. Seeing the ring on Salikats' hand, Beryl asked about it. Shurna then told him that the Ring of Gathering was a magical instrument that emitted light when living beings gathered together. Shurna said that Salikats was their detective, and his role was to make the dungeon's journey safer by spotting monsters as early as possible. Porta and Nidley were at his side, guarding him. That's the basics of teamwork in a three-person group. Suddenly, Salikats stopped Port, who was walking ahead, and told him there were a lot of monsters ahead. Port seriously asked Salikats what he meant by all the monsters waiting ahead. Looking deeper into the cave, Salikats informed everyone that they were goblins, and quite a few of them. Watching the goblins through the rocks, Beryl asked everyone to take a closer look, as the goblins were doing something there. Porta, hearing his words, looked at the goblins, observing their actions. In the darkness of the cave, the goblins were eating a single goblin. Porta and Nidley were utterly shocked by what they saw, and Porta declared that they were engaging in cannibalism. Then Porta asked Shurna what they would do, or whether they would simply take a different path. Shurna denied it and said they needed to destroy them all. Porta then looked at Shurna, noticing her actions. Shurna pulled a small knife from the studs of the belt she wore on her hip and turned to Salikats, suggesting they do everything as usual. Salikats nodded in agreement. After that, a small dagger flew from the adventurer's direction and hit the goblin Porta squarely in the head. Nidley and Salikats were already attacking him. Porta loudly announced that one was ready. Salikats pointed to the other goblin and declared him his target. Meanwhile, Shurna and Beryl stood by, watching the boys. Shurna told Beryl that she understood his feelings, but the boys had to cope on their own. Beryl, biting his hands and worried, replied that he knew. Then, calming down a bit, I thought to myself that the young adventurers were working very well as a team. Porta was drawing all the enemies towards him, and Nidley was supporting him. One of the goblins grabbed Nidley by the arms. She was startled by the unexpected grip. The goblin then swung, preparing to strike. But at that moment, Salikats appeared behind the goblin and, with one swift movement, obliterated him. Beryl, watching their battle, thought Salikats was protecting them from the shadows. After all, Salikats was a silver-ranked warrior, so he could assess the situation better than they could. A goblin appeared behind Salikats, holding a long, sharp stick. Noticing the goblin, Shorna began swinging her longsword with a rope, aiming directly at him. Shorna twirled her rope and abruptly threw her sword at the goblin. The goblin, wounded, fell to the ground, dead. Shorna said the goblins were quite cunning and warned everyone to be extremely cautious. After the battle, Nidli asked Shurna what had happened. Shurna replied that the goblins had resorted to cannibalism due to their hunger. Shurna and Porta stood over the goblin's dead body, examining it. The others stood further away, surveying the area. Then Shurna turned to Porta, asking his opinion on goblin cannibalism. Porta told Shurna that there were quite a lot of goblins here and asked if the goblins were starving. Why didn't they leave the cave? Porta answered his own question by saying that the goblins were afraid of something. Shurna asked what they were afraid of. Porta replied that perhaps a monster had appeared near the dungeon and started killing goblins. Beryl mused that Porta had reached this conclusion simply by observing the goblins. Shurna suggested that everyone end their investigations and report back to the guild. Shurna said the guys had done a great job and praised Porta, saying he had good judgment and made sound decisions, which were excellent qualities for a leader. Beryl responded that they had excellent teamwork. Beryl added that, among other things, they killed the monsters without hesitation, because if they hesitated, one of them could have been hurt. Suddenly, Knightley, noticing a wound on Porta's arm, called out to him loudly and worriedly said he had hurt his hand. Porta looked at his wound, raising his hand, and told Nidli not to worry. It was just a scratch. But Nidli still desperately denied it, saying that was no way to treat a wound, and asked for his hand. Porta apologized briefly to Nidli and said she always helped him. Nidli sheepishly said everything was fine, adding that she was the one who always needed his help. Beryl sat nearby, watching Porta and Nidli. Salikot said they always acted like this. Beryl was surprised, saying he hadn't mentioned it yet. Then Beryl asked if Porta and Nidli were really in love. He replied that they simply couldn't tell each other. From behind them, Shorna called out to them, drawing their attention. Salikot immediately apologized, saying he wouldn't talk about it again. Shorna sat down next to them and sheepishly replied that she, too, wanted to listen in on their conversation. Salikot continued, saying that adventurers have a saying, "A dungeon crawl is a boy's first step toward becoming a man." Salikot recalled yesterday. Back then, Porta had said that they were now only weaklings, but he wanted to change that. Beryl smiled and said those were very kind words. Shurna suggested they help Porta and Nidli get closer. Salikot replied that he wasn't sure, since it all depended on Porta himself. Shurna cursed him, saying what a stupid guy Porta was. Salikot told her that she surprised him and that he didn't think she was interested in such topics. Shurna asked Salikot why he thought that. Porta and Nidli sat watching them, asking when Salikot had become so close to them. Shurna, standing in the middle, seemed lost in thought. Noticing this, Porta asked if something had happened. She replied in the negative. Then she informed everyone that they were heading for the exit and warned that the most important thing was to remain vigilant. Everyone agreed. Everyone emerged from the cave. Salikot used his ring and reported that all seemed quiet. Nidli, looking through binoculars, said she also didn't see any monsters nearby. Porta suggested that everyone get out of the forest. As they were leaving the cave, a sound was heard from the trees. Noticing this, Beryl turned his head sharply to the left and looked into the forest, searching for the source of the sound. There was no one there. Noticing his suspicion, Shorna called out to Beryl, looking at him questioningly. Beryl then replied, still looking intently around, that something was wrong. Shorna asked Salikot about his ring, and he reported that there had been no reaction. Beryl then thought he'd only briefly glimpsed a huge shadow, but then became puzzled, wondering if it was a monster. Then it wouldn't have been able to move so quickly near the trees. Beryl noticed a huge shadow in front of him. At that moment, a monster was flying straight toward them at incredible speed, preparing to attack. Beryl, noticing this, shouted loudly to everyone that a monster was flying toward them from above. The adventurers turned to look at Beryl, and Shorna, hearing the warning, began to act quickly. Shorna quickly ran towards Porta, extending her hand to push Porta further away as well, almost grabbing Porta's collar. Shurna wanted to push him aside, but before Shurna could push him away, the monster rushed towards Porta right in front of her, grabbed him, and threw him aside with great force. Shurna looked at Port flying toward her. Port flew off at incredible speed, his backpack also flying off. Beryl looked at the wounded Port, while Nidalee began to cry and call out for Port. Porta lay unconscious on the ground nearby. His neck and chest were completely bloodied, and he showed no signs of life. Shurna crouched down and stood ready to protect everyone. A monster landed right next to them. It had a bird-like head and a lion-like body, and it also had large wings. The monster glared at them with an aggressive expression, its bird-like eyes. Beryl, meanwhile, watched the monster and thought to herself about its appearance, with the head of an eagle and the body of a lion, and told everyone it was a griffin. Shurna looked at the monster and ordered everyone to freeze in place, adding that it was a very dangerous monster. She said, very seriously and nervously, that in the past there had been a griffin that even the guild had been unable to destroy. Shurna pointed to the griffin looking proudly at them and said that it was the named Special Disaster Individual Xenograble. Among the many types of monsters, there are special specimens that are extremely difficult or impossible to destroy. The guild has given these monsters names and urged special vigilance against them. They are considered more natural disasters than living creatures. Cases of named beings being killed are extremely rare. A particularly distressed individual, this griffin has been given the name Xenograble, the Bizarre Gray Sun. The griffin looked at their group, gradually approaching them. Beryl, standing ready to attack, looked at the unconscious Port and wondered if he was alive, and thought that they needed to save him as quickly as possible. Suddenly, at this time, Shurna headed straight towards the griffin, without drawing her swords and approaching the griffin with her bare hands. The griffin, noticing her, screamed very furiously at Shurna and wanted to crush Shurna with her bird legs, trying to grab her. But Shurna very quickly dodged this attack and very deftly slipped between his body to Porta. Shurna approached Porta, hastily examining his unconscious body. Looking at Porta, Shurna happily thought that Porta was still breathing, but the wound was very deep, and he needed medical attention as quickly as possible. But at that moment, a griffin turned toward Shurna, shouting at her very aggressively. Shurna turned around, seeing the griffin, and was ready to draw her sword. But at that moment, the griffin, approaching her, suddenly pulled its octopus-like limbs out of the back of its head. They were very long and sticky. The griffin attempted to attack Shurna with its octopus legs, but it leaped up sharply, dodging Beryl's sword strike. Its octopus legs disappeared into the back of the monster's head, and it stared at Beryl with a very intent gaze. Then Beryl, still watching the griffin, without turning around, asked Shurna to help Porta. Shurna, holding Porta's head in her hands, wanted to object to Beryl's request, but Beryl himself interrupted her, still without turning around, asking her to do it. Shurna first looked at Beryl nervously, unsure of what to say, then lowered his head, realizing the situation. Shurna slung the unconscious Port onto her back and dragged him back to the boys. Calling for Nidalee and Salakotz, she ordered them to follow her quickly. Carrying Port on her back and realizing the situation, she cursed slightly. Meanwhile, Beryl drew his sword and prepared to attack the griffin. The griffin flew straight at him, screaming at the top of its lungs. Suddenly, the griffin's entire body and wings sparked with flame, creating some kind of magical light. Beryl looked at the griffin's body in confusion, bracing himself for any attack, and the griffin attacked him with its magical flame. Beryl stood motionless, ready to take the blow, and a fiery blaze swept through the entire forest, creating a massive explosion that caused all the trees to fall. Beryl recalled Lucy's words, saying that some monsters possess magical powers, though humans with mana are very rare. But not all monsters can use magic. The griffin stood watching the burning forest. But at that moment, Beryl emerged from behind the scorched tree he had used to shield himself from the fiery attack. The griffin noticed him just as Beryl chopped down a tree in front of him and was racing straight toward him. Beryl grew angry, thinking he'd had enough, and aimed straight for the griffin's neck. Beryl's sword had almost reached the griffin's neck when suddenly the griffin's neck caught fire, blinding Beryl with a bright light. After the griffin's body glowed, Beryl looked in shock at her sword, which was half burnt and melted, making a cracking sound. The griffin then continued to attack him with its foot. Beryl held the molten sword in front of him and was surprised when the griffin melted half of his sword, wondering out loud in bewilderment what kind of incredible body temperature it was. Beryl thought to himself that since his sword was now broken, it would be difficult to seriously injure him. But he could not escape, and that if he escaped, he could fly after Shorna and the others. As he sheathed his melted sword and took a ready defensive stance, Beryl considered that he must defeat the griffin or die in battle. Meanwhile, Shurna and the other boys arrived at the cart containing the first aid kit. Shurna quickly placed Port in a chair and ordered the others to tend to him, and once they were done, they should drive quickly to the neighboring village. Shurna, while running, opened the potion's wooden lid with her teeth. She then quickly poured the released liquid onto her injured right hand. After the treatment, Shona quickly bandaged her arm, using her mouth to help secure it. Shona angrily thought to herself that she was a failure, having put her teacher in mortal danger. She remembered how Beryl had spotted the monster before her and had stayed to protect them all. If only she could react as quickly, she would be able to protect Porta, and together with the teacher, she would be able to defeat this griffin. Shurna ran back to Beryl very quickly, jumping over fallen trees and rocks, and she couldn't help but feel joy at the thought of being protected again. In the past, little Shurna was riding in a cart. Her father and mother, sitting in front and saddling the horses, turned to her and asked if Shurna was tired. Little Shurna smiled easily and said that everything was fine. Then they stopped along the way to rest. Shurna's father told his wife that they had to reach the next town before sunset. But suddenly, her father's voice grew worried. Shurna, meanwhile, was sitting on the cart, admiring her flower headband. Suddenly, the cart shook, along with all the belongings. Her father called out loudly to Shurna, offering her his hand. But suddenly her father's body and his hand were separated. Shurna's father's hand was left in midair. Shurna was shocked, and the cart itself fell toward the waterfall. Little Shurna lay unconscious, but she heard fragments of voices asking her if she could hear them. Some time later, little Shurna came to, screaming loudly in fright. Frightened, Shurna sat down on the bed and began to look around the unfamiliar room. Then someone from the crack in the door saw Shurna waking up and loudly called his mother, telling her to bring some warm water, since Shurna had woken up. Then the man came into the room and greeted her, smiling and saying that she was fine, asking her name. Shurna was terrified, screamed loudly, and lay down on her bed crying, covering her ears with her hands. The man said he seemed to have frightened her. He calmly suggested that the girl had experienced something terrible, and offered to give her some time to recover. After some time, the man and her mother looked at the bowl full of food and expressed disappointment that the girl hadn't eaten anything either. Then the man's mother suggested that he, too, should at least get some rest, since he was always nearby. Young Beryl called his mother and said he wanted to stay with little Shurna a little longer, in case she woke up and no one would be there. Young Beryl said that would frighten her even more. Some time later, little Shurna lay in bed, shaking violently from her illness. She was breathing heavily, and a wet cloth lay on her forehead. Her mother, Beryl, said her shaking continued, and her fever was getting worse. Beryl's mother sat next to Shurna and worriedly said that her condition had worsened significantly. Beryl's father came to them with a large basin of hot water and announced to everyone that he had brought hot water. Beryl hurriedly put on his warm clothes and said he would call the doctor, as he should still be in the village. But his father stopped him. There was a blizzard outside, and all the villagers were sheltering in their houses from the weather. His father, asking him if Beryl really thought the village doctor would come to them in such terrible weather, asked. Little Shurna lay unconscious, dreaming various dreams. In her dream, she sat and cried, calling for her mom and dad. In the darkness, she asked her parents where they were and begged them not to leave her alone. Suddenly, in her dream, a small light approached her from behind. From there, a man placed his hand on little Shurna's shoulder and told her that everything would be all right. Before she could even see him, she woke up. The doctors next to her were happy that little Shurna had finally woken up. The doctor started asking her how she was feeling. Shurna stared at the doctors in fear, confused about who they were, and her hand accidentally touched someone else's hand, which was lying on the bed. Shurna turned around and saw a sleeping Beryl sitting on the floor next to her bed. Beryl was sitting on the floor, sleeping, oblivious. Little Shurna was very surprised to see him next to her. Then the nurses told little Shurna that this guy, Beryl, had been with her the whole time. They also told little Shorna that during a severe snowstorm, Beryl carried her in his arms from his house to the hospital, and thanks to him, they were able to save little Shorna. Beryl carried little Shorna, who lay unconscious, in his arms. He begged and pleaded with the hospital's doctors to help Shorna with her illness and save her. Shorna, who had come to, stroked his hand and said that his hand was very cold. Sometime later at home, Shorna sheepishly ate all the dishes that Berilla's mother prepared, and they were happy about it. Beryl and his parents said goodbye to her, telling the adoptive parents that they were leaving Shorna with them. As they left, Shorna looked at Beryl, thinking that someday she wanted to be like him, and waved back. Then little Shorna promised herself to become the kind of person who would be ready to help anyone. Beryl was currently fighting the griffin, almost in midair. Their battle took place almost in the sky as the griffin had wings. Beryl swung his sword in the air and with quick movements wounded the griffin's leg and one eye. The griffin had lost one eye and was heavily bloodied. But suddenly, the griffin grabbed Beryl's scabbard. Screaming in pain, the griffin dragged Beryl down with it. Through dense trees and bushes, the griffin and Beryl fell straight to the ground. The griffin threw Beryl against a tree and pinned him there. Then Beryl suddenly pulled the half-melted sword from its sheath and aimed it at the griffin's other eye. Then, with a sharp movement, he blinded the griffin's good eye. The griffin screamed in pain, but Beryl stood there, not taking his sword away from his wounded eyes, and tried to push him even deeper with a very furious face. But Beryl's sword burst into flames again, injuring his sword-holding hand. The griffin's eyes blazed with a bright flame, and he pressed Beryl against the tree with even greater force. Beryl blocked the attack with the sword sheath. Flames began to emerge from the griffin's mouth. Beryl looked nervously at the griffin, thinking that the griffin didn't seem to care that he deprived him of his sight. Beryl nervously and aloud said what a terrible monster the griffin was. Looking at the burning griffin, Beryl thought that he was glad that he had been able to hold out for so long, and he was sure that Shorna and the others had managed to escape. Beryl held on with all his might, not giving in to the griffin, thinking that even someone like him could hold out until this moment. By this time, Shorna had already come running to them, calling for her teacher, Beryl. Beryl, hearing her voice, looked at her. Beryl called her name in warning. But at that moment, right before Shorna's eyes, the griffin emitted a blazing flame from its mouth and pointed it straight at Beryl. But suddenly Beryl jumped back from the griffin's fire and cut off its leg. The griffin howled in intense pain, having lost one of its legs. Beryl, however, began breathing rapidly from excitement. Then, calming down, he looked at the sword he held in his right hand. It was Shorna's sword, which she had thrown straight into his hands. Beryl, with the last of his strength, held his scabbard in front of the griffin, which was pressing him against the tree with all its weight. At this time, Shorna ran up to them calling her teacher. Hearing her, Beryl turned to look at her. Then Shorna tossed Beryl one of her swords. Noticing this, Beryl quickly freed his right hand and grabbed the sword that was flying straight towards him. Beryl quickly cut off the griffin's leg and retreated a few meters. The griffin began to scream in pain. Beryl turned and looked at the exhausted and wounded griffin. He wondered if the flames were draining him, and he didn't think the griffin was using them as fire armor. He needed to watch the flames very carefully. Shorna appeared behind Beryl, drawing her second sword, and said that with these swords they could defeat the griffin. Beryl instructed Shorna to aim directly for its neck, lower body, and wings. The griffin became extremely angry and, blinded, began attacking with its fireballs. Beryl and Shorna quickly ran toward the griffin, dodging the fireballs. Beryl was already close to the griffin, but the griffin, sensing it, began to flap its wings, creating a wave of flame and dust. Then Beryl and Shorna attacked simultaneously and wounded the griffin's body. After the two of them attacked, Beryl looked at Shorna, surprised by her incredible speed, considering she'd just been behind him. Shorna looked back at Beryl and was also surprised by Beryl's speed, as he'd realized what Shorna was trying to do, and attacked just like her. But at that moment, the wounded and bloody griffin quickly rose into the sky, gaining altitude. Shorna looked at the griffin, noticing her actions. The griffin, still blazing with fire, began to collect a small ball of flame from its beak at a great height, which grew larger with each passing second. Beryl looked up at the griffin and, noticing the magical ball of fire in its mouth, He thought that the griffin was going to burn down this entire forest. Then Beryl twirled his sword and threw it straight at the griffin. The flying sword struck the griffin's hind legs. Beryl smiled thanks to Shern and said that he was now returning her blade to her. At this moment, Shorna was next to the griffin, and she caught her flying sword and prepared to attack it. Shorna took 2 swords in her hands and aimed them straight at the griffin's neck. With very quick movements, she inflicted wounds directly into the griffin's neck area, thereby mortally wounding the griffin. After the attack, the griffin flew down, and with it, Shurna. The griffin lay dead on the ground, showing no signs of life, and right on top of it lay Shorna, breathing heavily from fatigue. Shurna looked at her sword, the tip of which was slightly melted, and sighed with fatigue. But Shurna abruptly stood up from her crouch on the griffin, worried that now was not the time to rest, as Beryl's teacher could be wounded. But suddenly, Beryl came running to her from the side, excitedly calling her by name. Beryl held her by the shoulders and asked Shorna how she was feeling and if she was injured. To which Shorna, slightly stuttering and embarrassed, replied that she was fine. She then noticed his injured left arm and pointed to it, informing Beryl of this. Beryl then looked at his injured left arm, and after observing it for a few moments, Beryl nervously replied that his arm was in a lot of pain. Beryl apologized to Shurna and asked if she had any bandages left. Shurna smiled softly and said she would help him. Afterward, Shurna bandaged Beryl's arm. Already in the guild building, Porta, covered in bandages, very loudly asked for forgiveness from Beryl and Shurna, who stood in front of him. Porta said he was deeply sorry that his mistake had put them in such danger. Shurna stood before him and calmly told Porta not to worry about it, as they were glad he had survived. Shurna smiled proudly at Porta, telling him that Porta's quick thinking had saved Nidley and that he'd done a great job. She then reminded him that he'd been attacked by a named monster and had survived, which was already a great feat. Hearing this, Porta was touched, holding back tears. At that moment, Migan entered their room, apologizing for the sudden intrusion. He approached Porta and asked him how he was. Porta replied that his body still ached a little, but was already feeling better. Migan was pleased to hear this. Migan then bowed to Beryl, introducing himself as Gardenant Dono, saying that he heard that Beryl was able to single-handedly defeat the named monster Xeno Grable, and thanked Beryl for it. Beryl was about to object, but suddenly a man loudly opened the door and called out to Megan, asking him to come down for a minute. Megan apologized to Beryl and Shurna, and said he needed to leave for a moment. Beryl glanced at Migan's back as he left and asked Shurna if something had happened. Shurna was surprised by his question and didn't know how to respond. There were a lot of people on the first floor of the building. One worker shouted to the others that they were short of rations and asked them to bring some more from the Western District. Another worker responded that they would be transporting them now. Migan stood before the men, cloaked and holding a notepad. He nodded approvingly, turning to them and telling them that they would also count on them. The men in the cloaks say that they must obtain the remains of Xeno Grable by any means necessary. Hearing their words, Beryl asked Shurna what these people had said about the griffin they'd left in the forest. Then, confused, he added, asking Shurna why it was still so noisy. Beryl and Shurna stood on the second-floor balcony, looking down on the workers and Migan. Shurna told Beryl that the guild staff and supply chain were important. Beryl awkwardly asked Shurna why so many people worked there, to which Shurna responded negatively, saying that when it comes to the corpse of a named monster, everyone wants to get their hands on it, namely merchants, scientists, and also magicians. Shurna added that this is why there are so many people now, and the guild is trying to get as many rations and horses for them as possible, and they also need to inform other guilds about this. Clinging to the railing, Shurn said that the destruction of the named monster would be a loud event. Beryl invited Shurn to go eat, to which Shurn replied that she wanted to change first and asked them to begin eating without her. Beryl sat at the bar, thinking about the big event, having never imagined it would turn out this way. Suddenly, a middle-aged woman appeared behind Beryl and angrily shouted that they should all stop idleness and that they should work until their hands fell off, so that the meat would not spoil. Then she turned to Beryl and asked him why he was just sitting there. She placed a box of things in front of Beryl and ordered him to take it and carry it. Beryl remained silent, surprised. Some time later, Shurna came downstairs, having changed into different clothes. She spotted Beryl, who was carrying boxes along with the other workers. Surprised, Shurna quickly ran up to Beryl, asking him what he was doing. Beryl turned to her, asking if she knew where to put those boxes. She replied that the guild workers were supposed to handle that. Shurna then pointed at Beryl and informed everyone that he had killed the named monster, Zeno Grable, and that he wasn't some lackey who was supposed to do their work. Beryl said that Shurna had been the one who dealt the finishing blow. Meanwhile, in his room, Porter called out to Salikotz, who was standing next to him. Salikotz looked at him, asking what had happened. Then Porter mentioned Landred, saying he always let others take credit for his accomplishments, so he'd never be able to reach ocean rank. Salikotz responded that he'd heard the same thing. Then Porter called Beryl by name and said that he looked so much like Landred. At first, he was afraid of Beryl, because he was the one who was able to defeat Shurna. But after they got to know him better, he realized that Beryl was an incredibly kind person. Porter recalled saying that when he was about to shake Beryl's hand, he saw his palm. At that moment, Porter wondered what kind of grueling training Beryl had gone through to get his palms like that, but he was scared and didn't ask. Porter confidently admitted that his original goal was fame and achievement, and he was such a naive person. Then Salikotz, having listened to all his words, jokingly told him that he would then take all of Porter's achievements for himself. Porter then cursed him and told him that he was already a silver rank. Meanwhile, Shurna and Beryl were eating lunch, seated at the table. No one sat near them, running errands. Beryl awkwardly asked Shurna if it was okay for just the two of them to be relaxing there. Shurna replied that they had only recently finished their work and mentioned to Beryl that he was their guest. After this conversation, Beryl asked Shurna about her life and how things had gone, meaning after she left the dojo. Shurna replied that she had had a good life and that her adoptive parents had raised her wonderfully. Beryl was happy for her. Then Shurna suddenly became depressed, asking Beryl for forgiveness and saying that she should have visited them all at the dojo a long time ago. Shurna nervously held her head, saying that 20 years had already passed and how long ago that all was. Then Beryl replied that she had been busy after all, to which Shurna replied that that didn't mean she couldn't find some free time. Shurna covered her face with her hands and cursed, saying she was being selfish. Then Beryl calmly asked her if it really mattered now. Beryl smiled lightly and said that just seeing Shurna standing confidently on her own 2 feet made him a truly happy man. Beryl continued by saying that she shouldn't dwell on them and should instead help other people. But if she still wants to, she can come to the dojo at any time, and his father and mother will be very happy to see Shurna. Shurna listened to these words and suddenly burst into tears, covering her face with her hand. Beryl looked at Shurna questioningly, to which Shurna wiped away her tears and pouted, saying that she was fine. Then they laughed together. Maigen looked from the side at Beryl and Shurna, who was pouring Beryl a drink, and thought to himself that they were like father and daughter. In a workshop, a blacksmith was hammering a newly made sword, shaping it. He took the red-hot sword and dipped it in water without turning around. He told a newcomer that it had been a while since they'd seen each other, calling Shurna by name. The guest who arrived was Shurna, who wanted to ask the blacksmith Balder for a favor. Meanwhile, Alucia was sulking at Beryl, clearly showing it. Beryl looked at her expression and nervously wondered what she was angry about. Then Alucia called out to him, to which Beryl responded awkwardly. Alucia asked him about his arm. Beryl calmly replied that it was much better, that he thought it wouldn't stop him from training knights, and that the potions created by the magic division were truly incredible. Alucia was pleased. She then asked about what she'd also heard, that there were others wounded. Beryl agreed and said that the wounded were the newcomer and Shurna. Alucia was very surprised to hear Shurna's name. Beryl calmly replied that Shurna had been slightly scratched, but Shurna told him it was nothing. Beryl added that the newcomer had been hit pretty hard, but fortunately, he was still alive. Then Alucia told Beryl seriously that she wasn't exactly worried about Shurna. Then, with a weary sigh, she added that, after all, Shurna was a stubborn girl. Beryl looked at Alucia with a slight smile and remembered how they had been like cat and dog when they first met. Alucia said with displeasure that she was sure it was all because of Zeno Grable, as he was the swordsman's worst opponent, and if it weren't for him, Beryl wouldn't have been hurt. Beryl thought she was angry because he was injured. Sometime later, they arrived at the training ground. Evans Jin stood in the center of the arena, holding his wooden sword, loudly proclaiming that this was their 4th duel. His opponent was Kuluni Kulushil. Then, they began their battle. Kuluni was the first to immediately run at her, striking with a wooden sword. But Evans defended himself with his sword, not giving her the opportunity to strike him. Clooney's quick strikes made Evans a little nervous and sweaty as he defended himself. The fighters standing on the sidelines watched their fight and commented, saying Evans was simply incredible. Then they watched Clooney and spoke with admiration about how, with such a small body, she possessed such incredible strength. If someone fought Clooney in close combat, her opponent would not be able to strike back. During the fight, Evans thought that if Clooney hit him even once, he would lose. Clooney increasingly attacked Evans. Evans at one point stepped back a little, defending himself from Clooney's blow and dodging. He was able to touch Clooney's waist with his wooden sword, thereby winning the duel. All the fighters watching the fight declared their match over. Evans raised his hands in victory and rejoiced, saying he had won again and become a 3-time champion, and told her she still had a long way to go. Evans then calmed down and asked Clooney if her side was okay. Clooney, in her anger, began doing one-armed push-ups and calmly told Evans that she was fine. All the other fighters looked at Clooney joyfully, saying that she was still as energetic as always, and they held her up as an example, saying that they too should give it their all. Hearing the words of the fighters, one young man with dark skin and light hair looked at Clooney with interest during training. Afterwards, Beryl came onto the court, addressing Clooney and praising her, saying she'd done a good job today. Clooney happily thanked him for coaching her today. Then Beryl looked at Clooney and noticed something different about her. He asked Clooney if she was okay. Clooney replied with a smile that she was fine, but that her stomach was a little sore. But Beryl told her that wasn't what he meant. He thought something had happened to Clooney. Clooney abruptly stopped doing push-ups and froze, saying nothing. All the fighters, overhearing their conversation, began whispering, asking each other if it was true that Clooney was feeling ill. Hearing the fighters' conversation, the dark-skinned youth, like everyone else, looked at Clooney. Then, unable to withstand the pressure, Clooney quickly ran away from the training grounds. Beryl watched her back, confused, while all the fighters began to say that Clooney had fled too quickly. Sometime later, Clooney and Beryl were sitting on the steps of a building. Beryl asked Clooney if her ill health was due to her inability to win against anyone lately. Clooney, dejected, responded with an affirmative. Then Clooney began to express her frustration, saying that she hadn't been bothered by it at first, but had recently become saddened by it. Beryl didn't know how to respond and simply listened to Clooney. Beryl then asked Clooney why she always lost. Clooney quickly replied that it was probably due to a lack of preparation. Then, from her own answer, Clooney became a little upset, saying that most likely everyone was simply accustomed to her fighting style and that was her opinion. Clooney looked forward sadly and said that her style was quite simple, and she stayed close to her opponent and waited for the right moment to strike. She then added that, however, if the enemy manages to keep his distance, then due to her small stature, she is not able to reach him with her sword. And when this happens to Clooney, she sees no way to win. After listening to his sad words, Beryl said he understood, and in his mind he wondered how Clooney realized her weakness in this way. Then, after a brief silence, Beryl looked up and, with a slight smile, told Clooney that she should imagine herself in the enemy's shoes. Clooney was immediately inspired by Beryl's advice and looked at him hopefully. Beryl continued, saying that Clooney was extremely powerful at close range, so countermeasures were necessary as every knight knew her style. Understanding his meaning, Clooney became greatly inspired and looked at him with sparkling eyes. Then Beryl reminded her that this didn't mean she had to lose again and again, because in a real fight, losing meant death. Clooney resolutely asked Beryl what she needed to do to surpass her enemy, to which Beryl smiled softly and looked at her in agreement. Then Beryl stood up and asked Clooney if she would like to go for a walk with him. Some time later, Beryl led her to a small house and, pointing to it, said it was the very same forge. Clooney stared at the house in surprise, asking about this place. Then Beryl asked Clooney in surprise whether she had already been there. Beryl told Clooney that he had damaged his sword and Shurna had directed him to this place, remembering how Shurna had suggested that he come to this blacksmith at any time. Clooney laughed excitedly and nudged Beryl in the back, asking him to hurry inside. Beryl was surprised and, without saying anything, walked forward. Entering the blacksmith's shop, Beryl examined his workshop. Various swords of varying sizes and colors hung on the wall. Looking at the swords, Beryl marveled at how many there were. At this time, a loud voice of a salesman was heard near the checkout, asking the customer about what he said. Beryl paid attention to this, watching them. The merchant asked the customer again, explaining that he needed dragon scales for his wife's medicine and didn't have the money to send the guild a request. The customer agreed, saying he wanted to ask him for a sword so he could go after the dragon himself. Then the salesman called him menacingly and, after a brief silence, began to cry, saying that the client had truly been through such a difficult ordeal. The salesman himself looked very intimidating and strong, but he cried when confronted with such stories. Blacksmith Baldergas wiped a tear from his cheeks and told the client that he understood everything and asked for forgiveness for not being able to give him money, but offered the client to take any weapon from his forge. The cunning client feigned surprise, asking if it was true, and with a fake smile, said he would never forget his kindness. But inwardly, the client was glad that the rumors about the blacksmith were true, and it had been easy for him to deceive him. Suddenly, from behind, Clooney called loudly to the blacksmith, waving at him, and said she was from the knightly order and asked him to tell her what had happened. The blacksmith, Balder, immediately recognized her and greeted her. The client looked back, hissing in displeasure. Then, without saying anything, the client walked out into the street. Blacksmith Balder was surprised and asked why he had left. Clooney told him that the client had made a disgruntled expression and left, warning him that they were trying to deceive him again. But at that time, Beryl saw the blacksmith Balder and, calling him, joyfully said that they had not seen each other for a long time. Balder looked at Beryl, a little surprised. Then he became overjoyed, calling Beryl teacher. Balder spread his arms to embrace Beryl and joyfully remarked on how many years had passed. He also couldn't believe that Beryl had actually come to their kingdom. Balder trained at the dojo with Clooney and Fissel. He came to the dojo with a somewhat strange purpose. Balder then told Beryl that in order to forge good swords, Balder had to know how to be a swordmaster. Balder didn't care that he was training alongside the children. Barad still remembered the time Balder swung his practice sword alongside the other students. Clooney warned Balder that the cunning client simply wanted to get one of his swords for free and then sell it elsewhere. Balder, after listening to Clooney, told her he understood everything. Balder smiled, asking what it all meant. The client had lied about his sick wife, and he was glad that everything had worked out well. Clooney agreed with him, and Beryl looked at Balder, thinking that he had always been a very honest man. Then Beryl looked around the room, examining the various swords and complimenting Balder, saying there were many good swords here. Balder was delighted by this. At this point, a long sword caught Beryl's attention. Looking at the familiar sword, Beryl asked Balder what it was as Zweihander. Balder looked at Beryl, asking if he wanted to exchange his sword. Beryl denied this, wondering out loud if this sword would suit Clooney. Balder then expressed surprise, asking him if he wanted to find her a new weapon. Beryl agreed. Beryl explained that they needed to compensate for Clooney's lack of height with a longer weapon. And although Clooney was used to fighting with a one-handed sword, Beryl was confident that Clooney could handle a two-handed one. Clooney nervously asked Beryl if the sword's length meant she wouldn't be able to fight normally. Beryl smiled, telling her not to worry, as he thought he'd found the perfect sword for her. Kuzney Balder also thought for a bit and said that with Clooney's power, she could do it. But then he thought about the fact that she would have to switch from one-handed to two-handed. Then Beryl suggested everyone just give it a try. Clooney agreed, and Balder became intrigued. With the sword now on Clooney's belt, Beryl is out of her strike range. Badler looked at Clooney and told Beryl that this was a radical change, and worriedly asked Beryl that Clooney would definitely be okay, to which Beryl agreed. Beryl added that Clooney had to make her own choice, but he was confident that Clooney would come to the right decision. Although Beryl understood that choosing a new path in life was very scary. Looking at Clooney holding the sword, Beryl said that now Clooney just had to think about how it would help her. Clooney held the new longsword in front of her and was a little excited by the new sensation. Now the place where Beryl stands is within her reach. Suddenly, Clooney raised her sword sharply and called out to Beryl. Badler warned her to be careful and not swing it. Then Clooney said excitedly that she felt something, but did not yet fully understand it. Everything became clear to Beryl. Then Clooney told Balder that she would buy the sword. Balder gave his consent and said that he should finalize it. Then Balder said he still had some business with Beryl. Beryl looked at him in surprise. Balder, surprised, asked Beryl if he'd forgotten why they'd come here. Then Balder said that Shurna had come to him the other day, and she had told him their story. Shurna began by saying that Beryl refused to acknowledge his merits in killing the named monster, and she also complained to Balder that Beryl also refused the reward. Balder placed a bag of things in front of Beryl and said that this was why Shurna had left it to him. He showed the paw of the named monster, Xeno Greybull, pointing to the paw. Balder said that using it, he would make a sword for Beryl. Shurna's battered sword returned to its normal form in a second, removing all the scratches. Beryl was surprised. He said all the scratches on the blade had disappeared. Shurna replied that the sword was crafted from the fang of an immortal dragon and had been enchanted with regeneration, so it could instantly heal most of its damage. Shurna favored weapons that possessed monster abilities. She wondered what kind of sword Xeno Greybull would make. At this point, Balder asked for Kaluni's hand. Kaluni shook his hand, and they began testing each other's strength. Beryl stood in the background, covering his face with his hands. Feeling the strength of her hands, Balder saw a bull in front of him and told her that she had become even stronger, to which Kaluni laughed contentedly in response. Pointing to the bottom of the sword, Balder warned her that she had small hands, so she needed to be careful when holding the sword. Balder also said that based on the length of her arms, the blade's guard should be shortened a bit, and he would also try to lengthen the ricasso. Noticing Balder, he asked Kaluni if her side hurt. Kaluni responded affirmatively, adding that she had sustained the injury from today's training. Beryl was surprised when he asked Balder that he could even notice this. Balder is able to see a person's hidden abilities through a handshake, and he can also evaluate a sword through this. After calculating the cost, Balder gave Kaluni a price list, saying it would be about that. Kaluni looked at the paper and was surprised at how cheap everything was. Then Balder explained, saying that everything was just a prototype, and he needed time to make such blades much better. Balder approached Kaluni, telling her she could simply assume he was giving her a test sample. Kaluni thanked him. Looking at the price list, Beryl thought it wasn't cheap. Balder advised Kaluni to practice with the sword a bit and let him know if anything needed adjusting. Kaluni nodded in agreement. Balder then turned to Beryl, asking him if he would accept Xeno Greybull's sword. Balder added, telling him not to worry about money, since Shurna had already paid him for the work. Balder stood proudly saying that this was the first time he would create a sword from a named monster. But suddenly Beryl stopped him, asking for forgiveness and saying that he could not accept it. Balder was very surprised, asking why and saying that it was an excellent offer. But Beryl responded by telling him that Shurna was the one who killed the monster, so he couldn't accept it. Balder yelled at him that he didn't care. Balder then held Beryl by the shoulders, crying, begging him to let him create the sword. Balder admitted that he thinks about him often. In the past, Balder had seen Beryl professionally chop hay in half with a regular blade. Then one day, Balder looked at Beryl's blade. He was surprised that it was an ordinary, cheap blade. He couldn't believe it. Balder said that Xeno Greybull melted his blade with his flames. Then he added, asking him to imagine what it would be like if the Griffin's ability became his. Beryl was surprised by these words. Then Balder told him, pleadingly, that he could become even stronger. Balder made a promise to Beryl that he would forge a blade that would be the stuff of legends in the future. Balder wanted Beryl to wield a sword. Beryl sat awkwardly before Balder, who begged him and agreed to accept his sword. Beryl said that he would accept his sword. He will do everything in his power to use it properly. Balder was delighted and immediately offered his hand for a handshake. When Beryl shook his hand in return, Balder saw the power of Beryl's strength and was a little stunned by the fear of the powerful force. Beryl called Balder's name several times, and then Balder came out of his fear, saying that all was well. As he parted, Balder told Beryl that his sword would be ready when they came for Kaluni's sword, and he would be waiting for them. After saying goodbye, Balder stood near the cash register, sighing with excitement, and began to laugh. He thought that he needed to create a sword that would be worthy of this Leviathan. He smiled. Later that evening, Beryl went to the accounting office to collect his monthly salary. He thanked the accountant and thought uncomfortably to himself that he knew he would be paid a lot. As he left for home, he recalled Alucia's words about instructors being well paid. Beryl uncomfortably realized that walking around town with so much money was a bit scary for him. But even that amount certainly wouldn't be enough to create Xeno Greybull's sword, and Beryl was unlikely to be a match for someone like Shurna. Beryl turned onto a deserted street, thinking it would be better that way. But at that moment, a man in a cloak was watching Beryl. Beryl, walking around the city, checked his pockets for the fourth time. He checked for money and still couldn't calm down. At this time, taking advantage of his excitement, the man in the cloak quickly ran up to Beryl and stole his large sum of money. Beryl, noticing this, caught the thief by the hands when he was about to run away from him. The thief looked at him very fiercely. Holding his hand, Beryl looked at the man and thought he was a pickpocket. But then the man in the cloak suddenly pulled a knife from his pockets and pointed it straight at Beryl. But Beryl deftly dodged, taking the knife for himself. The little pickpocket was a little surprised by this. Beryl threw the knife on the ground and with a slight smile told the pickpocket that the money was important to him and asked him to return it. Then the little pickpocket suddenly threw out the bundle of money, which surprised Beryl a little. Then the pickpocket's hands, holding Beryl, suddenly burst into flames, screaming for him to let go. Beryl, covering his face from the flames, released the pickpocket's hands, and then the little pickpocket ran away very quickly. Beryl was surprised, asking himself what magic it was, looking at the pickpocket who turned the corner. Then, having calmed down a bit, he took his money and put it back in his pocket, thanking God. But Beryl also saw a ring on the ground, tied to a rope like a chain. Meanwhile, the little pickpocket ran away from Beryl and walked tiredly to one place. He knocked on the door and a bald robber opened it for him. A pickpocket entered a house where various robbers were playing cards and simply relaxing. They called the little pickpocket by her name, Mui, and told her she'd done a good job that day. Mayu placed a quota paper and a small bag of coins on the table. The man who looked at them said, with displeasure, that there weren't enough. Then the man in the bandana asked her angrily if she'd stolen some of the coins, to which Mui irritably replied that she had no reason to do such a thing, and advised her to count the coins properly. The man in the bandana cursed, angry at Miyu. But suddenly, a huge man with long black hair appeared behind the man. He placed his huge hands on the shoulder of the man in the bandana and told him not to be angry with the child. The man in black was their boss. He looked at Mayu and snapped his fingers, causing a bag of coins and papers to fly up and head toward him. Looking at the bag of coins, he said that there really was much less than usual. Then the man in black asked Manhua if anything had happened on the way, to which Mayu replied that it was nothing special and that she'd simply screwed up a bit. The boss was surprised, not expecting such a thing from her, and asked her if she'd use magic. Mui shook her head. The boss reminded her that if anyone saw her using magic, she would be immediately captured and sold into slavery and asked her to be extremely careful. Mui asked boss how much she had left, to which the boss replied that she owed 5 million darks and said that she had a long way to go. He added that he believed that she would be able to return them very quickly and then she would return home. Mui touched her neck and noticed that her pendant was missing. The boss, noticing the change, asked what had happened, to which Mayu frantically replied that the pendant was missing. The man didn't understand what to do with it. Holding the pendant in his hands, Mubi Beryl sat on the training ground. Alucia approached him and said that he had done a good job today. Beryl greeted Alucia and tucked the pendant into his inside pocket. Alucia asked about Kaluni. Beryl replied that she was doing well. Beryl added that Kaluni was just getting used to the two-handed sword, but once she mastered it, she would become much stronger. Alucia was happy for her and looked at Kaluni. Then Alucia thought awkwardly that if she changed her sword, Beryl would teach her something new. Then she shook her head, thinking that she couldn't throw away the sword that Beryl had given her. Beryl approached the young man named Hembritz and asked him what he thought about Kaluni and whether he had noticed any shortcomings or oddities. Hembritz was surprised by the question. Then Beryl said that he felt as if he was worried about Kaluni when she felt depressed, to which Hembritz replied that he was simply observing. Hembritz said he once saw Kaluni feeling depressed after a mission failed, and of course he wasn't the only one who noticed it. That day, the cheerful Kaluni behaved quietly, which made everyone worried. A Kaluni, seeing this, approached them and asked for forgiveness for making them worry. But it was clear that she was having a hard time. Hembritz felt that Kaluni thought she was useless. Then Beryl rejoiced, saying that he felt such a relief when so many people cared about Kaluni. Alucia joined in, saying that Kaluni once told her that she wanted to become the kind of knight who would make every person smile. Kaluni was able to do this because just being near the knights, they constantly smiled at her. Alucia advised Hembritz to just be himself. After some thought, Hembritz went to practice, telling everyone. At this time, Beryl called Alucia, and taking out Mui's pendant from his pocket and showing it, he said that he wanted to fix it. Alucia asked Beryl with displeasure if it was a gift from someone, to which Beryl replied in the negative. He told about his incident yesterday. Meanwhile, Mew came to yesterday's place during the day and looked for her pendant there. She remembered that she had defended him here. Suddenly, Beryl approached her from behind, asking if she dropped anything. Mew began cursing and turned to Beryl. Then Beryl recognized her. Seeing Beryl, Sue was very surprised and quickly wanted to run away. But Beryl chased after her, grabbing her hand. Mui screamed at the top of her lungs for Beryl to let her go. Then Beryl pulled the pendant out of his pocket and showed it to her, saying that this was all he wanted to return. Then Moi calmed down, looking at him. Suddenly, the city guards approached them and grabbed Beryl. Beryl tried to explain to them that everything was wrong and that they had misunderstood, but he was captured anyway. Mui looked at Beryl, who was already pinned to the ground with the pendant in his hands. Then one of the officers asked if she was okay. Mui thought that she could run away now, but something stopped her. At this time, Fissel appeared on the road. She asked the guards what was going on, and was surprised to see her teacher. After some time, the guards asked Beryl for forgiveness and left. Beryl awkwardly thanked Fissel for her help. Next to Fissel was a girl who thought Beryl looked ordinary. Fissel looked at Maya and asked Beryl what kind of child she was. Beryl replied that she had magical powers. Later, in the Southern War Train District, the headquarters of the Magic Division, Beryl and everyone else stood before the blonde girl Lucy, explaining the entire situation. Then Lucy, understanding them, said that Moi needed to be bathed first. Moi was very surprised. While swimming, Moi told Fissel and her friend to let her go. Then Fissel's friend agreed, but on the condition that she stop resisting. Then Fissel asked Moi if she was cold, thus reminding her of her childhood, where her mother asked about this. After remembering this, Mayu began to cry with her head down. Beryl was talking to Lucy and apologizing for coming so suddenly, and he felt as if he had put all the problems on her shoulder, to which the girl replied that she was not against it, and that she was attracted to people with potential. Beryl thought about the person who uses magic to steal. There were a couple of them in their kingdom. If a child gifted with magic is born in the Kingdom of Leberis, they usually enter the upper classes of society along with their family and are subsequently held in high esteem. Even so, Beryl thought Miyu must have had her reasons for stealing. Miyu stared at the food in front of her, her mouth watering. Blonde Lucy told Miyu that she could eat without worrying about the food being poisoned. Lucy introduced herself to Miyu and asked her name in return. Miyu said her name was Miyu Freya. Lucy invited Moi to stay at her house. She added that she could easily enroll in a magic academy, even if she was penniless. Measley could live on a scholarship provided by their country, and her family would receive one too. Lucy said that joining their academy would improve her magical power, and she would also be able to help other people. This way, Miyu will never have to steal again. Hearing Lucy's words, Mi suddenly covered her mouth with her hands and started coughing very hard. Beryl, who was standing next to them, asked Miyu if she was okay. Lucy approached Miyu, asking to look at her. Suddenly, Miyu saw a knife lying on the table in front of her. She grabbed it sharply, brought it to Lucy's neck, and loudly ordered everyone to remain still. Miyu told Lucy not to even think about using magic, because if any of them moved, she would kill Lucy. At this time, Fissel was about to take action, but Lucy's hand stopped her. Miyu asked Lucy that she could use magic, to which Lucy responded affirmatively and said that she was a magician. Then Moi told Lucy to take her to the one who could revive the dead. Everyone was very surprised by her words, and Lucy asked her about it again. Then Moi said that she wanted her sister back. Lucy told her that such magic didn't exist, and she understood that Miyu was sad, but she couldn't do it. Then Miyu pressed her even more against her knife, telling her to stop talking like that in a displeased tone. Then Moi said very aggressively that if they didn't have such a person, she ordered them to bring all the money they had. Then Lucy, unable to bear it, very seriously asked Miyu who was forcing her to do this. Miyu was stunned by the question and said nothing. Then Lucy said that just by listening to Manhua, one could tell someone had ordered her to do this. Miyu recalled the boss's words, saying there was a special magic that can bring someone back to life, but it required a lot of money. Miyu loudly ordered Lucy to shut up and, unsure what to do, she began breathing heavily. Then Miyu angrily recounted how she'd heard they were capturing people and selling them into slavery. Miyu aggressively questioned how they thought they could deceive her by simply giving her a bath and food. She looked at the others, asking them who they were and how they were better than her. In a fit of emotion, Mayu also said that she only had 5 million darks left and she would soon be able to see her sister. Then Lucy took Miyu's hands and abruptly removed the knife from her neck, thereby injuring herself. Taking the knife in her hands, Lucy turned to Miyu and said that with this table knife, all she could do was slightly scratch her neck. Lucy, pointing to her bloody neck, said that there's magic that can heal bodily wounds. Then, having healed the cut near her neck, she added saying that, however, since time immemorial, many magicians have tried to create a spell that could resurrect the dead. But of course, no one has ever been able to achieve this. Standing before Miyu, Lucy revealed herself as the commander of the magic division, Lucy Diamond. Lucy assured Miyu that there was no magic in their world she didn't know about. Then she said that the man was simply blatantly lying to Miyu. Miyu couldn't believe it and she became hysterical, denying it all. Then Beryl called Lucy and asked her if it was true that such magic did not exist, to which Lucy firmly confirmed it, saying it was a fact. Thistle thought she'd never seen Beryl so angry. Beryl approached Mayu and handed her the pendant with a soft smile, asking that this pendant belonged to her sister. Beryl told Miyu that he was very sorry it took so long to return it to her. Taking the pendant, Miyu began to tell that her sister always wore this pendant, and her sister said that it belonged to their mother. But one day, the man came to Manhua, holding the pendant in his hand. He told Manhua that her sister had died. Then Beryl asked Miyu where her sister might be. Miyu tearfully replied that she didn't know. Then Beryl suggested that Miri look for her sister together. Miyu remained silent at first, then asked Beryl, displeased, what he wanted in return. Beryl replied that he didn't want anything and simply wanted to help her. He told her that she could be anything she wanted. She shouldn't limit herself to anything. Lucy came up behind Beryl and said that he had made a scary face again. Lucy approached Miyu, asking her about the guy she was giving her money to which Miyu replied that he is called the Twilight One, and he is capable of using different types of magic, and he also has his own subordinates. Miyu told them that they couldn't defeat him, to which Lucy smiled slightly and said that everything would be fine and they would just have a little chat. Lucy asked Beryl if he would go, to which he quickly agreed. Thistle looked at Beryl and Lucy and was amazed and delighted that the two were united. Meanwhile, at the place where Mayui's boss is, various workers asked him why he was deceiving the little girl, to which their boss replied that if they used her magic correctly, they could make a lot of money. And besides, the boss was confident that Mayu would never disobey him. He said that she believed him, and would at least do so until she collected 5 million darks. Then the worker asked about Mayui's sister, to which the boss replied that he didn't care. After all, she was useless, and they were lucky that they were able to get this child. At that moment, there was a knock on their door. The guard asked if it was Miyu, but in fact, it was Miyu, Beryl, and Lucy standing outside. The elusive Twilight Hands are a band of bandits who operate in the main kingdom of Vartine. Because the damage they cause to society is so minimal, they are not considered a serious threat. Several witnesses have claimed that the elusive Twilight Hands were involved in numerous disappearances in the slums, but no one has ever been able to prove it. Beryl, Lucy, and Miyu knocked on the tavern door. The guard, without opening the door, asked who it was. Suddenly, their boss called one worker, whose name is Robberia. Opening the door to Moy, the guard saw Beryl and Lucy and became angry, asking what was going on. But suddenly, Lucy used her magic and threw the guard to the far end of the room. Everyone was alarmed. Rising from their seats, Lucy asked Beryl to keep an eye on little Moyu, making sure she didn't get hurt, and said they'd sort this out completely. Mayu was shocked by what was happening, while Beryl stood calmly, understanding Lucy. The gang boss shouted at them, asking if that had been too harsh. Lucy began to feign forgiveness, saying that the boy had suddenly started swinging a sword and she had lost her temper. Then Lucy looked at the boss with a cheeky smile and said she wanted to discuss a few things with him, but she seemed to anger him. The gang boss ordered the door closed, which the guard immediately did. Behind the closed door, Beryl knocked and called Lucy. But Moy called Beryl and pointed to the crowd of bandits who stood behind them, wanting to attack. Some of the workers were cursing when they saw Mayuya, and said that they should have dealt with her earlier. Some looked at Beryl and laughed at the fact that he was just a swordsman. Sometime later, Lucy had defeated all the bandits and stood before the boss, who was sitting in a chair. Lucy asked him if he was the one called the Twilight One. Then she sharply asked about my sister's whereabouts. The Twilight One laughed lightly, saying that Manhua would decide to ask the commander of the Magic Division for help. Twilight then asked Lucy where he and Manhua met, and if she knew any more of his people. Lucy snapped at him, saying she wouldn't answer. Afterward, Lucy used magic to seal Twilight into a transparent sphere. She told Twilight that she was currently investigating, so he should be the one answering her questions. Twilight began to suffocate inside the orb. Lucy responded that the spell was distorting space itself, making it impossible for him to escape. Although there was one guy who succeeded, then she began to loudly ask Twilight about the whereabouts of Manhua's sister. Twilight smiled and quickly dispelled Lucy's magic. Lucy was surprised that he was able to dispel her magic. He gathered his fist and concentrated all his power into it, striking Lucy. Due to the powerful blow from Twilight, a hole appeared in the wall leading to the street. Twilight looked at the wall and said with a slight smile that they would have to find a new shelter. But Twilight knew Lucy wouldn't die from such a blow. A ball of flame flew straight at Twilight, but Twilight was able to disperse it before it attacked him. He saw Lucy in front of him, with a large flaming sword behind her. Gathering all her strength, she launched an attack, gathering shards and stones from the wall and aiming them at Twilight. Twilight stood motionless, and the attacks failed to reach him. Lucy thought that even the physical objects she created with magic had no effect. Then looking at Twilight and noticing his black cloak, she remembered that this magical equipment was the attire of a Dark Eater. Once upon a time, there lived the monster known as the Sage Formachini. He was slain by two neighboring countries, Svend and Yardvania. This monster possessed the ability to resist all forms of magic. This black cloak is made from his skin and was made to resist magicians. Just as Lucy thought, this vile man was dressed in magical equipment from head to toe. Twilight attacked Lucy, but she jumped on top, thereby shortening the attack. Lucy threw a large wardrobe at him using magic, but Twilight stopped the flying wardrobe with his hand. He destroyed it in an instant. Lucy looked at Twilight and noticed various pieces of equipment, like the bracelet of infinite slice and the ring of severance. Twilight said loudly that magic was truly terrifying. He placed his hand on the wall and continued, saying that even a girl like Lucy could become much stronger than a man like him. The wall he was holding began to crack. Then, pointing his finger down at Lucy, the entire ceiling collapsed down. But Lucy easily dodged and stood there, thinking that Twilight even had a ring of power, and each piece of his equipment was worth more than an entire palace. Lucy noticed a cracking sound below, and suddenly a Twilight flew out of the rubble of the house. He grabbed Lucy by the throat. Twilight held her by the throat and said that he knew perfectly well that they mages could not fight at full strength in the city. Twilight continued by saying that they were near a residential area, and there were a lot of innocent people there, so Lucy couldn't use her magic recklessly. Twilight told Lucy that she was so stupid that she didn't think through her plan of action, so she would die here. Twilight began to squeeze Lucy's throat harder, saying that she was so shining and basking in the rays of glory. Then he pointed to the sky, asking to look there, and said with a smile that the sun was already setting, and it was time for Twilight. Then Lucy laughed and asked him if that was all. Twilight looked at her and thought about the feeling he had just had, and he thought about why Lucy had that look on her face now. Lucy told him that he was just a little child who liked to show off his toys. Twilight asked her incredulously. Lucy, with a very irritated expression, told him to shut her mouth and called him a boy. Meanwhile, outside, Beryl was being attacked by several bandits. A big robber with an axe wanted to attack him, but Beryl made a miss and fall to the ground on another bandit. Everyone else looked at him in surprise and asked each other who he was, while some admired his strength. At this time, Lucy pointed her finger down at Twilight, after which a black hole appeared under them, into which Twilight fell. He landed in the sewer. Emerging from the dirty water, he asked himself where he had been. Lucy told him they were in an ancient sewer and was surprised there was still water left. Lucy used magic to create steps for herself, which she used to descend. Lucy examined the sewers and said with a smile that it was indeed spacious. Then Twilight smiled, asking if she wanted to fight here at full strength, and reminded her that her magic was useless against him. Lucy looked at him and noted his insolent words, then asked about the fact that he thought he was better than other mages just because their spells were ineffective against him. Lucy gathered the magic around her and told Twilight that he was lucky. She will give him a private lesson, and she will carve into his very existence the true essence of magic. Magic is a phenomenon generated by the use of magical power. Monster abilities, such as shaking the ground or emitting an all-destroying beam, are also magic. Their magic is born from attempts to reproduce the abilities of monsters. They call it witchcraft. For many centuries, they called themselves not magicians, but sorcerers. Twilight took a piece of it from the floor and threw it at the wall. He then also hit the wall with his bare hand, trying to create a passage for himself. He heard a crack. But suddenly, a tsunami was approaching Twilight from the sewer. Lucy sent a tsunami straight at Twilight, asking in annoyance why he was interrupting the teacher's story. After the tsunami wave, Twilight was completely soaked. But before he could come to his senses, he was struck again from the ground. A stone statue appeared and hit him, sending him flying several meters. Twilight desperately thought that this was magic too, and wondered why his magic eater hadn't consumed him. The stone statue wanted to hit him again, but Twilight managed to touch it and destroy it into small pieces. Coming to his senses, he cursed, but suddenly Lucy appeared behind him, frightening him with her sound. After this, a large stone fist flew down on Twilight from above, pinning him to the ground. While Twilight was pinned to the floor, Lucy approached him and said that magical equipment that can dispel your opponent's magic is indeed a very dangerous thing. Then she added, saying that it was only capable of absorbing magic. She asked if he knew that mages could manipulate various objects without touching them. A Shadow Knight could dispel magic, but that didn't mean he could dispel water or earth in the same way. Then Twilight pulled out one of his pinned hands, telling Lucy that she should not underestimate him. Then, touching the stone hand, he destroyed it into small pieces. Twilight grabbed Lucy by the clothes and pulled her towards him. Then he suddenly threw her to the ground with all his strength, creating a small pit. Twilight gleefully asked Lucy what she really thought about defeating him. Then he began to finish Lucy off with his feet, blow after blow. But suddenly, he looked down at Lucy and saw that she had begun to crumble like sand. Lucy smiled at him, telling him that he had missed again. Twilight became very angry, scolding her. Then Stone Lucy created a large stone hand and struck Twilight with it. Twilight flew back several meters. The real Lucy appeared before him and advised him to hold his breath. Using magic, she surrounded Twilight with a ball of water, not letting go. Twilight tried to escape using his gear, but Lucy told him it was futile, and he wouldn't be able to escape, as she was creating strong currents to prevent her enemy from doing so. So his brute force wouldn't work. She then ordered him to listen to her carefully and continued her story, saying that the monster was immune to all forms of magic and that in battle with them, he stole their magical power to strengthen himself. In addition, they used arrows and various projectiles against him, but all of it was useless. And people began to believe that he was simply impossible to defeat. Then, snapping her finger and releasing only Twilight's head, Lucy asked him how they were able to kill the monster. Twilight couldn't answer, gasping for air. Then Lucy said the correct answer. We need to send a sorcerer who knows how to use body fortifications. If you use all your magical power to increase your physical power, then your opponent's magical immunity will not help him defeat you. But alas, magicians who do not understand martial arts or the way of the sword are unable to fully realize the potential of this technique. Then Lucy clenched her fist, causing power to build up in her hands. Twilight, looking at her, remembered a familiar feeling. He was still just a boy then, and every day his drunken father beat him with his fists. In those days, he had similar feelings. This is Lucy's fist of power that is aimed at him. Then he shouted loudly for Lucy to stop, and he said about Halika Freya that he knew where her sister was now. Twilight said that she is not here, and they sent her to another place, and he is the only one who knows where she is. Then Twilight told Lucy that if she let him go now, he would tell her about it. He added that they would immediately leave this city and not bother these girls anymore. Then he asked Lucy about his terms. Lucy, smiling sweetly, answered him negatively. Then Twilight got furious and started talking loudly about how she wanted to know where Miyua's sister was. But Lucy ignored his words, preparing to deal him the finishing blow. Twilight begged her to stop, but Lucy, ignoring all words, delivered his final blow. At that moment, the city's inhabitants felt an earthquake caused by Lucy. Twilight was defeated and lay unconscious on the rubble. Lucy brushed away the dust. She told herself that, firstly, someone had supplied Twilight with magical equipment. Secondly, judging by his words, one can assume that this man is somehow connected with Mayui's sister. Lucy wondered if some criminal was dabbling in magic with impunity, and she thought he'd definitely done something to him to keep him from telling. So she decided to continue the conversation a little later, and she found it interesting. Then she said that it was time to settle everything there, although she knew that Beryl could easily handle everything himself. Turning away, She said it was so boring. Beryl swore. It was dark outside because of the night. There was a battle going on near a house with a half-destroyed roof. The man with the headscarf received a blow to the chin that sent him flying. The one who attacked him was a man with brown hair. He, shielding his companion with himself, easily defeated the opponent in a headscarf with only a wooden cane. The man did not relax after defeating his opponent. After all, the other bandits who had lost to him earlier rose from the ground. He also needed to protect the red-haired girl. The bandits rose from the ground with difficulty. They were still in pain from their previous attacks. They looked at the man with brown hair with some fear. Beryl, looking at them, realized that they no longer had the desire to fight him. Now he just had to wait for Lucy. But who would have thought that the boss of the bandits would be able to hold out against the girl for so long? But the man had other important business, so he did not think about this case. Suddenly, claps were heard, and someone admired the man's incredible strength. The blonde boy praised the man's skills. He was a swordsman from the bandits' side. All this time, he just stood and watched them. But the man was sure that he was a strong swordsman. Suddenly, the fair-haired guy said that he was surprised. The boy realized that the man was indeed from there. Beryl looked at him with a questioning look. He did not understand what he was talking about. Then, the boy remembered the girl who decided to fight his boss. She was the commander of the magic division. It seemed that it was already too late. Suddenly, the man in the kerchief called out to the fair-haired boy named Robbery. The robber did not understand why the swordsman was just standing there doing nothing. He ordered Roberius to destroy the man. He sighed and agreed to the bandit's order. Beryl immediately took a fighting stance, preparing to defend himself from the attack. However, instead of attacking him, the swordsman attacked the bandit in the kerchief. Beryl and the attacked bandit were shocked by Roberius's actions. The fair-haired boy looked at the bandit darkly. He hated people like him. Robari warned him to be more careful with his words in the next life. The other robber was enraged by Robarius's actions, but he didn't even have time to get close to the guy before he attacked him. The man could only accept the attack, which would eliminate him. The group of remaining bandits did not understand why the boy betrayed them. Robarius quickly headed towards them. At the same time, he swung his sword. Beryl covered the dark-haired girl's face with his large palm so that she wouldn't see everything that was happening. The man looked tensely towards the battle. Only the terrifying screams of the bandits could be heard. Soon the entire group of bandits was eliminated by Roberius. The guy exhaled from fatigue. Then the fair-haired guy turned towards the man, but immediately encountered misunderstanding. Beryl was furious with the boy's actions. He looked at him with displeasure because he eliminated people in the presence of a child. Robbery, realizing the reason for his displeasure, called Beryl a kind person. Then the blonde boy, apologizing for not being able to fight Beryl, left them. He needed to leave this place as soon as possible. The man could only look tensely at the departing guy. After some time, a carriage with people appeared at the scene. The knights were cleaning up all the aftermath of the robbers' battle. A man with long wavy hair sat near the wall, hiding his face. His hands were tightly tied with a rope. It was the same Twilight, the leader of the band of robbers. The armored girl asked her companion about the contract. The contract was valid, so the Hat Girl gave all the magical equipment of Twilight to her. Sometime after they learned about my ooze situation, everyone was discussing who would be in charge of the safety of the streets and the citizens. Alucia asked the girl if she was sure. After all, if their higher-ups found out that the commander of the magic division had done something like that, it would cause a lot of trouble. However, the girl did not think so. She would say that she was simply looking for Manhua's sister and accidentally found the bandits' hideout. And then one attacked her, and the girl simply defended herself. The division commander was sure of her innocence. Then Commander Alucia noticed that her teacher didn't have a sword. She was right, but Balder hadn't completed his sword yet, so Beryl would take the wooden sword with her, to which his student offered him a training sword. Beryl, hearing the girl's offer, agreed to it, and then thanked Alucia. The division commander considered the man a country bumpkin, for he should not walk the streets without a sword. Beryl was shocked by her impudent speech. The girl's name was Lucy. Evening came. They detained all the survivors of the Twilight Gang. The knights were waiting for Alucia's order. The armored girl ordered her subordinates to take all the surviving bandits to the underground prison beneath the kingdom. Mui asked the girl about what would happen to the captured Twilight person. She thought that he would be eliminated, but that wasn't the case. They were going to interrogate the gang leader and find out about the kidnapped girls, as well as Miu's sister. Muse, looking towards the captured gang leader, understood everything. Suddenly, Miu was distracted by Beryl's call. At that time, the man was cleaning up the barrels. The knights did not want him to do such a job. However, Beryl allowed one of the bandits to escape, so he wanted to help them. Miu wanted to know about Beryl, whether he was of high status in the city. Her interlocutor said that he was, although it may seem to someone that it is not so. Meanwhile, Commander Lucy approached the man and the other knights. She removed all the consequences of the battle, with the help of magic. Muley remembered how throughout her life, the people she met along the way looked at her with hostility. All of them did not even want to communicate with her. However, Beryl was different. He didn't act like the people she met. He thought of her as a simple child. That's why Mew thought the man was strange. Her interlocutor agreed with this. He really was like that. Alucia looked at the man with brown hair with a smile. Suddenly, Miu suddenly informed the girl that the escaped bandit's name was Robari. She thought that he was unlikely to be connected with the Twilight Gang. All the gang members had an unpleasant appearance and lacked manners. But Robari was different from them. He was always clean and graceful. He did not look like a person who would follow the orders of Twilight. That was all Mayu knew about him. The armored girl thanked her for the information. She promised the red-haired girl that she would do everything she could to find her sister. It was dark outside. Only the light from the tavern window slightly dispelled the darkness. Beryl sat at the counter in the tavern. The room was noisy. Lively customers were arguing among themselves. Beryl continued to eat his dinner awkwardly. He realized that he had probably chosen the wrong place to eat. The noise from the fight was interfering with his enjoyment of the meal. The man, sipping his drink, thought about how he had not been very helpful in the recent incident. Mui remained under Lucy's care for a while, and his student returned back to the administration. Beryl was not pleased with himself, because he had promised that they would sort it out together. But he had done nothing. However, the man accepted that perhaps it would be better if the girls sorted it out themselves. The brown-haired man picked up his drink again. Sighing, Beryl thought it would be nice if this could all be resolved with a simple swing of his sword. Suddenly the man's peace was shattered. A black-haired boy flew into him. Their collision caused all of Beryl's drink to spill right on his face. It turns out that the black-haired guy had somehow angered the gray-haired man, because of which, in his irrational state, he wanted to pounce on the guy. However, his attack was stopped. Beryl grabbed the old man's hand and stopped him. The gray-haired old man was angry at the man's actions, but Beryl calmed him down with his strength, thus forcing the gray-haired man to his knees. Beryl, being drunk, was angry about the noise. He just wanted to drink his drink in silence, and now it was spilled because of them. The old man angrily pulled his hand out of the grip. He was furious at Beryl's actions. The gray-haired old man was about to strike at Beryl. At that moment, the black-haired guy said something about the right side. Beryl was surprised by his words. He attacked the old man with an imaginary sword right in the right side. He was open to attack right there. With his movements, Beryl was able to dodge the old man's blow. He looked at the black-haired guy with interest. He was also engrossed in his drink. The man's face was not visible because of his hair. Meanwhile, the old man, angry at the failed attack, turned back to Beryl. At the same time, the men said something about the back of the head. Beryl then attacked the old man with an imaginary sword. Beryl and the black-haired man were interested in the innocent fight. They anticipated the exposed areas of the old man's body as he moved, where they could attack the old man. In the last attack, Beryl chose to attack his left thigh with an imaginary sword. The black-haired man was surprised by his choice. The man was chatting about a possible attack. The old man was breathing angrily from everything. He turned towards the men with rage and pulled out a real sword. The angry old man wanted to eliminate Beryl. Screams were heard at the sight of a real weapon in the room. The old man still did not calm down. The man looked calmly at the enraged opponent. They simultaneously realized that the best attack in this round would be a blow to the head. Then Beryl quickly approached the gray-haired old man, who at that moment only swung his sword. Beryl quickly grabbed the sword with both palms, stopping the old man's attack. The old man continued to swing his sword, but Beryl calmly held the sword, not allowing it to move. At the same time, a bottle with a saucer flew onto the old man's head, thus causing him to faint. The enraged old man was finally dealt with. The black-haired man with the stubble assessed Beryl. He had done a good job against the old man. Although if the black-haired man had become serious, he probably would have easily defeated him too. Beryl believed his words. After a while, the two men sat at the bar together and chatted about their lives. The black-haired man was surprised that Beryl had risen from commoner to knight. But Beryl didn't think it was a worthwhile story. The black-haired man told him that he was having problems at his current job. That's why he wanted a drink to take his mind off it. But Beryl didn't think it was a funny situation. Beryl had lived in the countryside most of his life and had only recently left it. The man told his interlocutor with shame and awkwardness. Beryl's father decided to retire after an injury and left the dojo to him. All this time, he was a fencing teacher at his father's dojo. Beryl considered his father strong. And during all this time, he was unable to defeat him. 20 years of his life passed like this, and Beryl thought that he would live his whole life like this. But one day, one of his former students decided to get him a job in the capital. And that's how his new life came about. That's why Beryl's interlocutor was incredible. After all, he was able to reach his dream on his own. Beryl didn't think so about himself. Also, the black-haired man was still young. So Beryl believed that it was good for him to take breaks every now and then. Beryl's interlocutor told him that every swordsman has his own duty. Before, Beryl had been locked in a cage. But now, he was free. Now the man would be able to fulfill his duty, which would come someday. Beryl was shocked by the other man's words. He remembered how his father had appointed Landred as the manager of the dojo. That was when he was sent to the capital, to fulfill his duty. Beryl thought about his duty as a swordsman. Then Beryl became depressed. He thought about how the girl was not easy, because they were busy with the gang of Twilight, while he was sitting in the tavern and drinkings. Beryl was ashamed. He felt sorry for Alucia and Lucy, because they were working hard now, while he was resting. The man was so absorbed in his thoughts that he didn't even notice how his mug was filling up. It was still dark outside. The area was only illuminated by street lamps and lights from the windows of buildings. The black-haired man, standing on the bridge, was calmly drinking his drink. He was also thoughtful. After all, it really all came down to one's own duty. Suddenly, someone noticed him. It was Robari. He greeted the man. The fair-haired guy realized that he had gone out to drink at the tavern again. The black-haired man was called out. His name was Spore. Then Robari approached Spore with a girl. The boy and the girl wore the same cloaks. The girl also wore a veil on her face, leaving only half of her face open. Sheeper was not happy about their appearance. He had already told them earlier that when he had a day off, they were not supposed to show themselves in front of him. But the girl and the guy came to him for work. The girl told him that Twilight had been caught, so Bishop was calling for Spur. Then Robari happily told everyone that he had seen an incredible swordsman. According to people, he was very skilled, although he did not look like a knight. However, this man might be even stronger than Spur. This was indeed bad news for them. But the man was not worried about it. Spore entered the room and sat down in a chair. There were already other people in the room, including Robari. They were all dressed in the same cloak. The veiled girl said that it would be troublesome to deal with Twilight, but it was only a matter of time before the magic division could get all the information from him. Robari regretted that he was not eliminated immediately in battle. The rest of the team was silent. Spur decided that they had to eliminate the leader of the Twilight gang. It was dark outside. Only the light from the windows illuminated the darkness. Meanwhile, in the basement under the building, there was an underground prison, in one of which was located Twilight. Commander Lucy was interrogating a man. She wanted to know the current location of Sister Manhua. The man with dreadlocks looked at her with a puzzled look, because he had already answered this question before. However, the girl again menacingly awaited his answer to the question. Twilight replied the Helic of Freya was somewhere, but he couldn't continue his answer as he suddenly froze. The knight and the magician looked at the frozen man. Each time he answered the question, the man froze and looked into space. Lucy hit the man to bring him to his senses. The knight realized that some kind of magic had been cast on the prisoner. A spell of silence has been cast on him. The man cannot speak of certain information, and he himself does not understand that it has been cast on him. Lucy could dispel this magic, but to do so, she would need to gather all the mages to help her with it. The problem was that by doing so, they could accidentally break the man. At this point, they had to prepare properly. As soon as the magicians finished with everything, they would immediately return back. Lucy wanted to take the men to her headquarters, but moving the criminal from place to place was rather inappropriate. The girl in armor was named Alucia. She was currently looking for Leberis, and the knights had also increased their guard on the streets. Hemberts took Lucy's luggage. He wanted to take her. Lucy appreciated his actions. The guy also offered to take Fissel's luggage, but the girl, pouting, refused the guy's help. Then, turning away, she said that she could handle it herself. Lucy asked the boy if he had a fight with Fissel, but he hadn't. At least the boy didn't remember it, so Lucy teased him. Hemberts then assumed that it was all because of the training battle. He remembered that he had been able to dodge Fissel's attacks a couple of times, but he was still unable to deal with her magic blade. The girl did not agree with this. She called him Bier's a liar. Using her magic blade, she won only 7 fights out of 10. The guy was able to win 3 times. Although the girl still defeated him, magicians have a big advantage in a fight with ordinary swordsmen. Therefore, winning 7 battles and losing 3, for Fissel, it was like a draw. Hemberts awkwardly accepted the girl's displeasure. He thought that Fissel definitely hated him. Lucy also noticed that Hemberts had made a dangerous enemy for himself. After all, the black-haired girl does not like to lose. She is only happy with an absolute victory. The girl with these words indicated that Fiss was similar to someone. Meanwhile, somewhere Beryl sneezed at the mention of him. Hemberts thought Fissel was very strong because of her magic blade. That's what Fissel heard. It was all thanks to her excellent swordsmanship. She definitely learned it from Beryl. And again, somewhere around there, Beryl sneezed at the mention of him. Hemberts continued to speak. He and Fissel were taught by the same person. Therefore, he too cannot lose the fight. Meanwhile, in the underground prison, 2 knights guarded the prisoner's cell. Twilight. Suddenly, one of them fell down. He was instantly immobilized. His partner was surprised by this. He looked at his immobilized partner in shock. At that moment, a man in a cloak jumped on him from the ceiling. Soon, the prisoner's cell, Twilight, was freed from guards. Twilight was called out. The man in the cloak informed him that he was the messenger of Bishop. Twilight was glad of his quick appearance. The man told his rescuer that he hadn't told anyone about them. The Twilight wanted to get out of the cell as soon as possible, but as he approached the man in the cloak, Twilight received a sword attack. He was shocked by the actions of the man in the cloak and wanted to know the reason for the attack. The man in the cloak only said that his subordinates were waiting for Twilight in the afterlife. It turns out that the man eliminated all members of Twilight's gang. Suddenly, Clooney burst into the chamber with a sword. She was surprised to notice the wounded Twilight, who lay motionless on the stone floor. All 3 knights immediately began to descend into the underground prison because an intruder had entered there. Clooney told the man in the cloak that reinforcements would soon arrive, so he should surrender. But he didn't think so. The man in the cloak approached the girl with lightning speed and attacked. However, Clooney was able to defend herself from the sudden attack. She was able to hold back the enemy's onslaught. Clooney was then able to forcefully push the man back, causing him to bounce back some distance. Clooney noted that if they continued fighting in this place, she would have an advantage. Meanwhile, the man in the cloak climbed up the indentations of the stone bricks with lightning speed. He held onto the free edges of the brick in the ceiling with only one hand. Then the man in the cloak swung his sword towards the girl. Clooney immediately defended herself from his attack and fought back. The girl was surprised by the superhuman strength of her opponent. She understood that she had to keep her distance. When suddenly the man lowered the brick and went down. Having descended, he immediately kicked the girl's legs with one leg, causing her to lose her footing. Clooney found herself in a dangerous situation because her opponent wanted to attack her. Suddenly, someone's voice was heard. It was Hembert's Drought. He instantly appeared in front of the girl and protected her from a possible dangerous attack by hitting the man in the cloak. The blow sent the opponent flying straight into the bars of the cell. Clooney was surprised by the sudden appearance of the vice commander. Hemberts looked seriously at the enemy. The guy came out of the cell to the man in the cloak. He appreciated that he was able to withstand his blow, because Hemberts did not hold back. Then the guy found out about Clooney's condition. She was fine. Hemberts ordered her to take Twilight to the infirmary and tend to his wounds. Now only he and the man in the cloak remained in the prison. The man in the cloak instantly ran out of the underground prison, avoiding Hemberts. While escaping, he encountered a crowd of knights on his way, so he immediately turned the stairs to the side. The knights ran after the intruder who was climbing up. Emberts knew that no matter how fast the intruder was going, there was nowhere to hide up there. Soon the man in the cloak found himself in a dead end, surrounded by knights. However, he was able to get out of the situation by opening a window. He was about to jump out. The knights could only shout after the intruder. A man in a cloak fell into the leaves of a tree. The knights looked down on the courtyard. No one could survive at such a height, so no one expected to see a living intruder. Suddenly, the knights noticed that an intruder was running out of the bushes at lightning speed. They were shocked by this, because it was impossible. However, the man in the cloak continued to run forward. Suddenly feeling something, the man in the cloak turned back in surprise. It turned out that Hemberts was chasing him. He was trying to catch up with the intruder. The man was running towards the shopping district. The guy ordered the other knights to lure the intruder into a trap, with barricades on horseback. Hemberts knew that the man in the cloak was unusual, but who would have thought that he could survive a fall from such a height? The guy considered the intruder not a human. Ahead of them was a long, wide staircase with a large number of steps. The men ran quickly along it, Hemberts not lagging behind, chasing the intruder. The residents, running away from them, looked at this with surprise. As he climbed the stairs, the man in the cloak saw a cart with things nearby. Jumping onto it, he tore the rope holding the thing, and then threw all the things down. With one blow, he knocked the barrels over right towards Hembier's. The boy was unable to dodge the barrels flying towards him because of the innocent villagers nearby. Soon, the man in the cloak heard a woman scream, but he didn't get what he expected. The man in the cloak turned back in surprise. Hemberts quickly sorted everything out. He caught the barrels. He broke the third one, so the guy promised the merchant to pay for the damaged goods later. The man in the cloak was surprised. Now he considered Hembier's not a man. However, the intruder continued his escape. Soon he hid in one of the houses. The guy noticed this and realized that he wanted to set up an ambush. The intruder, having opened the door in the house, closed the front door with a chest of drawers. The residents of the house were frightened by his appearance. They looked warily in the direction of the man. However, the obstacle in the form of a closed door with a chest of drawers did not stop the guy. Hemberts was able to break the obstacle with his strength and enter the room. The man in the cloak was shocked by this. Continuing to run after the offender, Hemberts asked the residents for forgiveness and promised to pay them for the damage. The intruder, having climbed the stairs, wanted to escape, but Hemberts didn't give it to him. The guy managed to grab the man by the leg, and after a strong grip, he pushed him straight out the window. With one blow, the guy and the intruder found themselves outside the house, right on the street. They fell right into the fabric curtain of the house. Their fall raised dust around them, and the man coughed from it. His hood was removed. Therefore, the face of the intruder was revealed. He was balding. The left side of his face was affected by a burn. He himself was elderly. He remembered a conversation with his team. Spur had told them that they needed to avoid unnecessary eliminations if possible. After all, if there was a conflict with one of the knights, the entire order could start hunting them down. So it was better to make them think that Twilight had liquidated itself. But if they were caught, Spear advised them not to fight two people, no matter what. One of them was the vice commander of the knightly order Leberis, Himbred Strout, nicknamed Roaring Blade. Hembiers fought alone against two opponents. They tried to attack the guy from both sides, but he easily dealt with them. The guy defeated two knights and then called for the next opponent. The defeated opponents, breathing heavily, accepted their defeat. They asked the guy for some rest. The other knights noticed that Hemberts was on edge. They were glad to have him training them, but it was hard to keep up with him. Hemberts noticed that they lacked combat experience. He also wanted to try a few techniques. However, the guy was concerned about the training method, whether it really suited them. The guy wondered if he could ever catch up with Thistle and Alucia just by training. But he understood his capabilities, which made him upset, and thoughts about this only hindered him. Suddenly, he was attracted by a ringing voice. It was Kaluni thanking her teacher for her help. Beryl was breathing heavily. He told the girl that she could contact him at any time. Then the tired man noticed Hembier's training. The guy realized that he had been running with Kaluni. He even felt a little sorry for him. Beryl, still breathing heavily from fatigue, challenged Hemberts to a duel. The man realized that he looked tired, but he could fight. The boy looked at Beryl in surprise. After a while, only the clanking sounds of swords could be heard on the training ground. After defending himself from Beryl's blow, the boy attacked the man, but the man was able to block his blow. The knights were surprised by this. Hemberts noticed that he had a chance to attack the man. He quickly approached the man to attack him. However, Beryl was able to anticipate his actions. Instantly, the man easily grabbed the boy by the waist, taking away his support. The knights were stunned by this, because the boy was close to victory. After the fight, Beryl wanted to know about the guy's condition, because he hesitated during the fight. The guy just thought about something. Hemberts knew that brute force would not help him against Beryl, but he was lost in his thoughts when he saw his chance to attack. The guy noticed the guy's depressed state, so he again offered him a duel, only that Beryl was able to get behind the guy, so he lost. The man gave an idea to Hemberts to create a move that he could use in a similar situation. However, Hemberts was concerned that the man was very tired after everything. The guy was right, but the man himself was curious about the reception in such a situation, especially since Hemberts would be able to come up with something. Besides, it would be fun. The vice commander was struck by the man's words. He realized that, in the end, everything had to go its own way. If this path leads him to what he so desires, it will calm his soul. The boy thanked Beryl. Beryl showed him the way. So Hemberts was confident in his powers. He stood calmly in front of the old man in the cloak. His opponent was not so confident. The boy noticed that Kaluni was not the kind of person who could be defeated so easily. But the man in the cloak was able to easily disarm the girl. Therefore, Hemberts realized that he was a hired worker who had managed to infiltrate Leberis. The man was definitely not an ordinary person. Embiers couldn't let him escape. If it had been the commander, she would have definitely managed. The boy realized that he was thinking about the wrong thing again. He should focus on catching the man. He needs to concentrate. Suddenly, the man grabbed a bag of vegetables and threw it straight at the guy. But he managed to block the bag with his hand. Then, suddenly, the man attacked the boy, injuring his arm. Having thrust his sword in, the man belatedly realized that he could not pull his sword out. While the men were in serious condition due to the stuck sword, Hemberts, despite the wound, tried to attack the intruder. However, he was able to dodge and after a while pull out his weapon. The guy didn't stay in place. He headed towards the man. The offender realized with horror what he was about to do, but Hemberts changed the direction of the attack. The man in the cloak blocked the sudden blow. By this time, Alucia was approaching them. The intruder could hardly defend himself from the guy's persistent and crushing blows. However, Hemberts attacked the man again. The old man in the cloak defended himself from the attack, but the boy did not stop and pressed on him. The man tried to hold back from the onslaught of the attack. The force of the blow made the old man unable to hold on, and he fell to one knee. The men were shocked by the boy's strength. After all, such strength could not belong to an ordinary person. Soon the old man decided to let go of the sword and simply attack the guy. Then, in a sudden maneuver, he found himself behind the knight, grabbing him by the neck. It seemed the old man's luck was running out. Because of all the people he came across, it was Hemberts' drought. The men did not let go of the guy and pressed him. The boy had to let go of his sword. Hemberts said the old man was wrong. The boy then hit the man with all his might, causing him to relax his hands and let go. Hemberts was able to free himself from the enemy's grip, and he knocked the man to the ground with a blow. Hemberts grabbed the man's hand and disabled it. He then told his enemy that if he had been truly unlucky, he would have encountered someone more dangerous than him. The man screamed from the pain in his arm. The boy ordered the intruder not to resist, because he would hurt him again. Suddenly, the boy's eyes widened. After all, the old man had attacked his leg. Hemberts was shocked by this because he had previously disabled the man's arm. The boy realized that the man had used restoration magic, to which the old man only grinned a partially toothless smile. Instantly, the man grabbed the boy's hand and threw him to the ground, thereby changing their places. The man pushed the guy away from himself and ran in the other direction. On the way, the old man grabbed his weapon. Hemberts, with a wounded leg, knew that he would not be able to catch up with the intruder. The man understood this, so he smiled vilely. However, there was a blonde girl next to them. Alucia stood in front of the running old man. Seeing the commander of the knightly order, the man realized that he was in a terrible situation. After all, Spur advised not to fight two people, one of whom was the vice commander of the knightly order Leberis, Roaring Blade, Hemberts Drought, and the other person was Alucia Citrus, nicknamed Divine Flash, and it was she who stood before him. The man took a fighting stance. He stood tensely and looked towards the girl, because he did not want to be eliminated. Meanwhile, unnoticed by the man, Alucia instantly moved and attacked him. The old man in the cloak didn't even realize what had happened. Alucia attacked him too quickly. However, all the damage the girl had done was erased by the restoration magic. Therefore, the man was unharmed. After receiving the attack, the man in the cloak responded by attacking the girl, but she was able to dodge it with ease. Alucia again. He wanted to approach her, but she instantly disappeared from her place. The girl then attacked the man. The old man was shocked by the girl's incredible speed, but Alucia did not stand still. She attacked the man again, pinning him in place. The man could not move. The girl informed him that from that moment on, the Knights of Leberis were arresting the old man. A group of knights immediately approached him. The old man understood the whole situation that had arisen, and he had only one way out of it, namely, to use the pill on himself. The girl noticed this, but the man had already crushed the pill. At that moment, a stunning explosion illuminated the area around the alley. Hembritz approached the commander with concern, but she was fine. The explosion had not affected her. It seemed that the man had used a magical device to eliminate himself. The guy noticed that the girl had quickly dealt with the enemy. He apologized to the commander, since now their lead to Mayuia's sister was lost. Alucia grabbed the boy's hand. She carefully examined him for wounds. However, the guy reassured her that he only had one wound. Also, 2 men were seriously wounded, but they would be fine. Alucia breathed a sigh of relief, glad that the casualties were small. She then ordered someone to take Hembritz to a healer. While the knights were distracted by everything, a girl from the enemy team stood far away from them. After some time, she was already in the forest. The girl informed her comrades that Jemmy had been eliminated, but the old man had managed to eliminate the target. Now they had one less problem. Robari realized with some regret that Jemmy had been eliminated. It seemed that the Knights of Leberis were not weak. The girl believed that the light of God would lead Jemmy. Spur was angered by their arrogant speeches. He asked them to be quiet in a furious voice. The girl and the boy immediately became quiet. Then Spur, leaving food and drink near the tree, asked for forgiveness from Jemmy. After saying goodbye to Jemmy, he told the others to tell the bishop that he was ready to escape at any moment. Robari was surprised. After all, they had nowhere to run, so he did not understand doing this. But Spura had a bad feeling that something terrible was about to happen. Beryl was busy with his sword. Mayu looked out the window alone. Mayu's sister promised the girl that she would come soon, so Mayu had to behave well and wait for her there. The girl, stroking Mayu's head, said goodbye to her. Lately, Sister Mui has been going out a lot. She told her that she had found a job. Thanks to this, they can eat bread every day. Miu wanted to become an adult as soon as possible. The girl wanted to help her sister, but after some time, Twilight came to her to notify her about her older sister. She was eliminated. The man just had to deliver the pendant to Moi, and that would be the end of his job. The girl stared at nothing, dumbfounded. She didn't think the man's words were true. Mai angrily screamed that he was lying. She clutched the pendant in her palm in anger. Suddenly, with her angry cry, a huge stream of flame burst out of her. The departing group looked at the girl in surprise. They realized that she had been using magic unknowingly. Mayu looked at the flames that had engulfed her with a puzzled look. Then the background changed. All the people disappeared. Only she remained, but soon her older sister appeared behind her. Miu happily told her sister that she had learned how to use magic. Soon she would be able to go to school, and she would also have her own home. So she offered to live with her. However, her older sister only leaned towards her and told Miu that it was already too late. After her sister's words, Mayu woke up from her sleep. The nightmare brought tears to her eyes. The girl was breathing heavily and looked at him with a furious and desperate look. After a while, the carriage approached Lucy's mansion. Beryl looked at the mansion in surprise. It was huge. Alucia noticed that the teacher had opened his mouth too wide. Then Beryl and Alucia entered the mansion. The man wanted to know the reason why Lucy had invited them to her home. Lucy told Alucia that meeting at the headquarters of the magic division would cause inconvenience to the secret guest. Soon the man and the girl entered Lucy's office. She apologized for calling them so urgently. Then she invited them to sit down on the chairs. Beryl was surprised that the girl had servants. Soon Beryl noticed a man dressed as a priest standing opposite Lucy. Lucy advised Beryl to be patient. Before the man introduced himself, they had to ask him a question. Alucia asked Beryl about the swordsman Leberis, whom the man met in the Twilight hideout. Then Beryl told them that Leberis owned the rapier. The girls' looks immediately became serious and interested. Beryl continued speaking. In their encounter, Leberis used a regular sword, but from his stance, it was clear that he wanted to deliver thrusting blows. Beryl was sure that he had trained a lot with a rapier, but the man vaguely remembers Leberis' appearance, only that the guy had a fringe that covered one eye and a braid. But that was enough for others. All the stories about Leberis fit the description of the man. While investigating the disappearance of Halika Freya, the girls found out who supplied magical artifacts to Twilight. It was the bishop of the Veltrain Church of Stina, Levios Sarleone. The faith of Sfun is a religion in which everyone believes that there is only one true god in the world, and that is Sfun. It originated in the neighboring country of Sfundor Yardvania and has already spread widely throughout the kingdom. Then after the explanations, the man introduced himself. His name was Ibre Hallman. He was a priest of the Veltrain Church of the Steen faith. The difference between a bishop and a priest was that a bishop was higher in status than a priest, and above the bishop was the pope. That was roughly their hierarchy. Bishop Sarleone was Ibroy's immediate superior. When Lucy told him about his affairs, the man was stunned. Then Ibroy continued speaking. There were a couple of things that seemed suspicious to him. First, unidentified bodies started being brought into the church grounds. Although it is quite natural, there were too many of them. Besides their church, there are others in this kingdom. Secondly, for reasons unknown to him, only the bishop was in charge of these bodies, and they were not even allowed to look at them. There was also a possibility that among these bodies was Miyuia's older sister. The Dark Eater's robe that Twilight wore was a sacred relic of this church that someone had stolen long ago. Also, speaking of which, Twilight had other magical artifacts that were confiscated from him. Such things are not something an ordinary thief can obtain. Ibroy also discovered unusual embezzlement by the church. It could be assumed that Twilight provided the bishop with bodies for a fee. Ibroy didn't know what he was planning to do with them. Beryl, hearing his words, asked himself only one question. If the priest knew about the situation, then why did it keep happening? Beryl didn't understand why Ibroy didn't stop them. The man was depressed by this information. And this is what Alucia noticed. Beryl's unspoken question was answered. Unfortunately, they had no evidence to back it up. The man was shocked because they themselves knew that the bishop was behind this, but they weren't 100% sure that the bishop was the ringleader. They didn't have any hard evidence. And if they just came and said all this without any proof, he would just come up with a good alibi. They also don't know how Sfendordvania will react to this. If they do so, they could provoke a conflict between the two nations. That's why they can't detain the bishop at the moment. Beryl was stunned by this information, but that didn't mean they didn't have another option. They could bring in multiple witnesses to testify. However, it will take time. Miyu listened tensely to their entire conversation from behind the door. She was shocked by the conversation she overheard. That's the only thing they can do for now. Lucy will talk to the royal family and ask them to close the borders for a while. They didn't want the enemies to escape. The man had already left the office. He remembered the girl telling him to leave the rest of the problems to them. However, Beryl was not happy about that. They soon made a firm decision about the situation. Sometime later, late in the evening, their location had moved from the Waltrine Church of the Sven faith. Moi, hiding from people, looked at the church. Getting into the church grounds was easier than she thought. Now all she had to do was sneak inside the church. Then the girl ran fast along the church wall. Having approached the right place, Mu jumped over the wall, and soon she found herself in a hidden place. However, to her great surprise, she was not alone in this place. Beryl was sitting next to her in the same pose. The girl and the man looked at each other in surprise. Soon, a silent scream of shock from the unexpected encounter was heard. But the man and the girl stopped him so as not to be caught by others. Having calmed down, they began to whisper to each other. The girl and the man wanted to know the reason for their appearance on the church grounds. Beryl lied that he came to pray, but then he realized that Miyu had been listening to the conversation. The girl awkwardly looked away. Then the man told her to look him in the eyes. So the girl had to tell the truth. Beryl was right. She was eavesdropping on them. After all, Miyu really wanted to find her sister. She didn't care who was behind it. She just wanted to find her. Mui had to do it because the others were useless. However, the girl said in a sad voice that she was also useless. If only she had awakened her magic a little faster, then perhaps her sister would have been by her side. If it's for her sister, then Mayu is willing to do bad things. She'll do anything. The girl was upset that she was so slow. Beryl had nothing to say to that. Suddenly, Miyu called out to Beryl. He turned towards the girl and wanted to know the reason for her call. Mui, with tears in her eyes, firmly told him that she wanted to see her sister. The man accepted her wish. Then he said that they would find her together. The girl calmed down and wiped away the tears that had appeared. Soon they approached the door. The girl easily opened the door lock. Twilight taught her to do this, although she rarely does it. Beryl was concerned that the girl was entering the church alone through a different entrance. He suggested that they go together, but with his body size. They would be quickly found. Then Yuri asked the man if he would help her if something went wrong. Beryl told her that he would. Two nuns walked quietly through the church. When the girls had moved some distance away, Miyu came out from hiding. The girl soon found herself in a storage room. The room was spacious. There were sacks and barrels along the wall. She noticed that when comparing this storage room with other rooms, it was clear that it was built recently. Moyu felt something suspicious about this place. Suddenly, the door to the room swung open. Moyu was stunned by this. It was a girl hiding her face with a veil. She was looking through the storage room with the help of a lantern. Mayu noticed that the girl had a sword with her. She realized with surprise that she was a knight of the church. The girl did not understand why the girl was in this place. Walking forward, the girl suddenly turned towards Mayu. She was quickly approaching the place where Mayu was. The nun knight was about to take her weapon out of its sheath. Mayu, hiding in the shadow of the pillar, was looking tensely towards the girl. Suddenly a voice was heard, from which the girl and the little girl simultaneously shuddered. It was Beryl Gardenant. He was standing near the entrance, trying to call someone. The man also noticed that a knight, had entered the pantry. He was worried about Mayu. Soon the girl went towards Beryl, leaving Miyu alone. The girl was grateful for the man's help. He helped her a lot. Then the girl immediately found a secret door in the storage room leading deeper. She, lighting her way with fire, was pleased with her find. Meanwhile, in the church, in the prayer hall, a veiled girl joyfully greeted the visitor. Her name was Yuro. She was a sister of the faith of Sane, and also a knight of this church. Yuro thanked the man for appearing. After all, she was always glad to see new believers. Then the girl led the man around the hall. Beryl understood that he needed to buy some time for Moy. Yuro knew at first glance that the man was a swordsman. She thought he wanted to join the Knights of the Church. But that was not the case. Beryl lied and said he came to offer his prayer. Then the girl wanted to know the reason for his concern. Beryl lied again, saying it was a personal problem. Yuro asked him the question again. Now she wanted to know what he liked about Sfina. The man somehow managed to get rid of the girl's annoying questions. Now he just had to go with the flow. Yuro began her explanation. They said that in the beginning, the god Sven was a man with a sword. So the swords of their church were modeled after his sword. It was a great honor for Yuro to own one of them. Sthenes fought for the weak, healed the wounded and sick. He performed so many miracles and could even revive bodies. He saved so many people from the fear of liquidation. Many believers worship him as a god who can command the lost. Saying all this, Yuro became excited with admiration for her god. Then the girl woke up from her state of admiration and apologized to the man. Beryl was scared by what she had just seen. Suddenly, knights entered the prayer hall. One of them was Robari. The guy immediately recognized in the silhouette of a man a familiar swordsman. Namely, the swordsman who caught the twilight. The boy asked the man what he was doing in such a place. Beryl, stunned, said Robarius's name. At the same time, the angry Yuro grabbed a wooden bench and wanted to attack the man. Luckily, Beryl was able to dodge the bench that was flying at him. Yuro was angry that he lied to her about loving God. An angry look at the man, Beryl ran towards the girl, simultaneously pulling his sword out of its sheath. Suddenly, the man felt something from the side. It was Robari. The blonde boy attacked the man, but he was able to defend himself from his attack. Robari was delighted by Beryl's magnificent sense. The man prepared to attack. He had already swung his sword when his attack was stopped by Robria's companion. The boy thanked Goran for saving him from Beryl's dangerous attack. He was a little scared at the possibility of elimination. Beryl was wary. After all, there was also a Nunkent knight behind him. The angry girl still hadn't forgotten his unforgivable lie. After all, the man had entered their sacred place and lied about his faith. There were also two rivals ahead of Beryl, Goran and Robari. Robari tried to calm Euro down because they had to defeat this swordsman. The boy explained to his companions that the three of them needed to unite and give it their all in this battle. Beryl was calm. He stood in a fighting stance, expecting an attack from both sides. Meanwhile, Spur, the black-haired man, sat alone and depressed in a chair. Opposite him on the table lay a knight's helmet. The man looked at it sadly. Then, sighing, Spur put on his steel helmet. He also put on a long, tattered scarf. At the same time, Mi-U was descending the long stairs to the basement. Soon the girl reached the door. Opening the door, she found herself in a basement. There were papers with a plan attached to the wall. There were also huge wooden boxes. The girl realized that these were wooden coffins. She remembered the priest's words. He said that the bishop's goal was the miracle of resurrection. The miracles were granted to them by Lord Steens. The followers of Steen's faith believe that the healing and strengthening of the body is also a miracle of Steen's, and calling it magic in the presence of believers was taboo. The miracle of resurrection was considered the highest level of Steen's miracles that were described in their legends. But as Lucy said, it is simply impossible. It is nothing more than a common legend. However, among their believers and practitioners, there were people who wanted to reunite with their deceased loved ones and comrades. Mui realized that in order for the bishop to be able to perform that very miracle, people dragged all these bodies into the basement. The girl also thought that Twilight was hiding this from her. It was possible that her older sister was in one of these wooden coffins. Mayu looked at the coffins with some excitement. Suddenly, Spur appeared in the room. He told the girl not to dare touch them. He asked her why such a child, as she was doing in such a place. Mi realized that she was in a difficult situation, but she immediately pretended that she was just playing with her friends and got lost. The girl, trembling, looked at them with feigned fear. Suddenly, the bishop was also near Spur. The gray-haired old man was glad that it was just a child. He then ordered Spor to take the girl to the utility room. But suddenly, Spor called the girl Mui Freya. She tried to disagree with him and give another name. However, the man continued to speak. No one had told him that name, but his subordinates told him that Twilight had picked up a red-haired girl in the slums, so Spur knew it was her. And who else but Twilight could know this place? At that moment, Miu used all her magic. A huge stream of flame appeared in the room. The girl, with anger and panic, ordered them to leave, but they did not even move from the spot. The gray-haired bishop was surprised that the girl possessed magic. Schuper only looked at her tiredly. Then, with one movement, the man neutralized the girl. Mi did not even have time to see his actions, as she had already fallen unconscious into Spur's arms. Then Spur turned towards the bishop. They should leave this place as soon as possible, and also burn all the evidence. The bishop was not happy about this. The angry old man did not think that they would have to say goodbye to this place so soon. Afterwards, the old man calmed down and came to his senses. He was still able to achieve some results. Therefore, as soon as they returned to their country, he would immediately continue his research. The man also wanted to take the girl with him. After all, she was a magician and was of great value for his experiments. The gray-haired bishop turned towards the wooden coffins and ordered someone to stand up. At that moment, the coffin lids rose. Spur wanted to know if they would take them too. The bishop wanted to take them. After all, they were resurrected, even if not completely. It was proof that he had become closer to God. The bishop said that this was only the beginning of miracles, the cornerstone of all things. Opposite the old man stood the bodies of people silently. At the same time, Beryl was busy fighting against 3 opponents. The man was not yet tired of such pressure. He was completely focused on the battle. Suddenly, Roberia called out to Euro. The girl immediately began to read her prayer to God, asking him to grant them his divine protection. At that very moment, an aura surrounded the trio. The next moment, Roberia easily knocked the bench over towards the man. Beryl was shocked by the sudden change of monks, knights. Beryl tried to dodge the bench flying towards him, but Harem was behind him. The guy attacked the men, which made it hard for Beryl, because he had to deal with everyone. The man was already having a hard time. He couldn't believe that they became active after the so-called miracle. Now Beryl understood what it meant to be a knight of the church. The Knights of the Church are a knightly order that directly serves the faith of Stain. They are known for all using a sword, the Estak. They also have knights in their ranks who can use miracles. There weren't many knightly orders in this world where knights fought exclusively with piercing weapons, and also capable of using miracle. All this was told to Beryl by Hembritz. The man completely agreed with him. Robari attacked the man, aiming for his leg. However, Beryl was able to dodge his attack. He was then attacked by Euro, but Beryl was able to dodge her attack as well. All three knights of the church were preoccupied with the possibility of destroying the man. The knights occupied Beryl from three sides, preventing him from retreating. Robari and Euro tried to hurt the men with their attacks. Jiran waited for the moment when the man would come closer to him in order to attack him. Beryl easily dealt with both attacks of Euro and Robarius, knocking them with their swords. Then he was expected to be attacked by Jiran, but Beryl was ready for it. The man blocked Harem's attack with his scabbard. The boy was deeply shocked by the man's actions. His sword pierced Beryl's scabbard. Therefore, the boy was unable to pull his sword out of Beryl's scabbard. This is what gave the man the opportunity to easily attack Harem and incapacitate him. Euro and Robri were shocked by the elimination of Harem. Harem fell silently under the man's attack. Beryl then turned towards the boy and girl. Then Robari panicked. He knew that the two of them couldn't handle the man. They tried to run away, when suddenly Beryl attacked the girl, wounding her. Now Euro used a miracle on herself in panic, healing the wound. Seeing this, Beryl realized that she was the only one of the three who could use the miracle. Robari realized that at this rate they would all be eliminated. Beryl and Euro attacked each other. The girl was suffering from the persistent and dangerous attacks of the man. He was hurting her more and more. Suddenly, Spur appeared in front of the girl in a helmet. He blocked Beryl's attack, preventing him from further injuring the girl. The black-haired man with stubble and Beryl met again, but now on different sides. The dangerous and oppressive auras of the men looked at each other. Spur's aura was in the form of a huge poisonous snake, while Beryl's was a dangerous monster with tentacles. Spur, using the power of the miracle, pulled his sword out of the grip and attacked the man. However, Beryl was able to block the blow with ease. Then Beryl forced the swords down. The swords met again in a blow. A second later, each swordsman pulled his sword out of captivity. They attacked each other again, placing their swords in the danger zone. Within the men dodged the attack and jumped back some distance. Beryl looked at his opponent. He realized that the man in the helmet was a strong swordsman. Most likely, he was even stronger than Alucia and Shorna. The Knights of the Church of Valtrain are a private army that Levio Sarleone has assembled. Although their army does not have a high rank in the knightly order, they are a source of pride and admiration. The priest also heard rumors that there was a man in their army whom they called Night Hunter. Alucia was shocked by this nickname. Beryl wanted to know more information about the knight. A few years ago, there was a serial hunter who committed a lot of crimes. He eliminated a huge number of knights, so Svendoyarvenia became worried. At first, everyone thought that some anti-church organization had arranged it. But a witness was found who claimed that it was all done by one person. This criminal was never caught, but people gave him the nickname Night Hunter. If all these rumors are true, then he must be a very strong man. Beryl thought that it was him, the same Night Hunter. The man was wearing a helmet, and a scarf hid his true hair color. Spur quietly said that Beryl was the famous swordsman from the backwoods after all. Beryl looked at the man with an uncomprehending look. He didn't understand what he said because his voice was too quiet. The wounded Euro called out to Commander Spor, but he didn't even turn around. The man ordered them to retreat immediately, get into the cart and leave. Then, remembering something, Spur ordered to take one child with him. The girl who has magic, she will be unconscious for some time. Beryl immediately realized that the man was talking about Mia. He was in a fighting stance, trying to get closer to the exit, while Spur was coming to his senses. However, at that very moment, Beryl felt the possible danger of being wounded right in the neck. The next moment, Spur instantly approached him and attacked with his sword. Spur was surprised to see that Beryl had been able to see the trajectory of his attack. Beryl dodged the attack. It would have been dangerous if his opponent had hit the target directly. But in order to save Mayu, Beryl had to defeat him. Spur also had the same goal as the man, but for a different reason. He wanted to defeat Beryl. At the same time, the wounded Euro tried to heal herself with a miracle. She thought that she had to help Commander Spur. Rabari was simply following orders. Besides, if they stayed there, they would just become ballast for him. Beryl and Spur were absorbed in the fight, each wanting to defeat the other. Beryl swung his sword, aiming straight at the man's head, but he was able to dodge the attack. Now it was Spoi's turn to attack him, and Beryl was already prepared to defend himself. The man was able to defend himself from the blow. Beryl was also surprised that his opponent was still on his feet. Meanwhile, he was attacked again, aiming straight at his legs. But Beryl managed to jump at the right moment. Spur was looking at his opponent. Beryl realized this, so he jumped some distance away from him. The man noticed that his opponent had inhuman endurance. No matter how many blows he dealt him, he continued to skillfully contract them. It was also difficult for Beryl to read the trajectory of his sword. Spor's strikes were especially dangerous. After all, not everyone can pull off something like that. The enemy had speed and precision. Although they wouldn't help individually, he skillfully combined them. Then Beryl stood up again. The man was in a stance to attack his opponent again. Spur was expecting it. The black-haired man considered the possibility of his next move. If he openly attacked Beryl, Beryl would easily be able to remove the weapon from his hands, and then he would be left unarmed. Spur was thinking about what he should do in this case. Beryl was expecting an attack from his opponent. The black-haired man was about to step. Suddenly, zombified bodies burst into the church. They tried to enter the prayer hall through the windows, smashing them completely. The shards flew around the hall. Beryl and Spur were shocked by their unexpected appearance. Beryl thought for a moment that they were more reinforcements, but then the man noticed that they were unarmed. Beryl then thought that they were ordinary civilians. Spur was angry, because the bishop had told him otherwise. The gray-haired old man ordered the zombified bodies from afar to eliminate those who did not belong to the church. At that moment, everyone pounced on Beryl. Among the people running towards him, Beryl noticed a red-haired girl. The man thought it was Miu, but a moment later he realized with a deep shock that it wasn't her. A disheveled, red-haired girl with a blank look was running towards him. It was Miu's sister. Before arriving at the church, Beryl wanted to ask Miu what her sister was like. The girl told him that she was a beauty. Her sister always laughed and put her above everything else. Until the very end, her sister was worried only about her. At these words, the girl looked sadly at her pendant. The defeated Harem lay on the floor. At this time, people attacked Beryl. The closest to him was his sister Mayu. The man anxiously wanted to push the girl away from him, because it was dangerous. But she continued to look at him with a meaningless gaze. Then the girl grabbed him tightly by the clothes. After that, Sister Moya knocked the man towards the bench. Beryl was shocked by her incredible strength. He could only cry out in pain from the collision with the bench. Suddenly, Beryl felt something. It was another man from the crowd trying to attack him. However, Beryl was able to dodge the blow, and with one movement of his hands, the man destroyed the bench in half. Beryl was shocked by their power. He realized that it was a miracle. The blonde man's body was illuminated by the aura of a miracle. Beryl also noticed that Sister Mayui's body was cold. Then he realized that all these people had already been liquidated. He remembered a conversation with Lucy about a mage who could control bodies. It turned out that he poured his mana into a liquidated body in order to use it to control the body of the deceased. The man remembered the sad and sorrowful eyes of Moya when he mentioned her sister. The girl wanted to find her sister so much. But now her sister stood in front of him, looking at him with a blank look. Beryl was stunned. Suddenly, the man noticed that Spur was running away through a broken window. Beryl wanted to stop him, but he was held back by the bodies of the people. Then he had to use his power. Beryl tried to stop them. He attacked them right in the leg so that they couldn't move, but the zombified bodies continued to advance towards him. Then he realized that they couldn't be stopped like that. Beryl asked them for forgiveness. The man then attacked one of them. His goal was to destroy them. Beryl seriously injured the black-haired zombified girl. He continued to try to dispose of the bodies of the fallen people, but they still continued to advance towards him, stopping only when they attacked. Beryl had to attack them relentlessly. The man, looking at their wounds, understood that everything was wrong. Because they kept trying to get closer to him, Beryl had to experiment and hit different places to disable them. After time and numerous attacks, the man finally attacked right into the heart of the zombified body. And that's when the cold body fell to the floor. It was incapacitated. The man realized that it was the heart that was the trigger for their elimination. He waited for the others to approach. While eliminating them, the man noticed the reason for their actual destruction. Someone was wounded in the throat, someone was sick, and someone was hit in the head. Beryl neutralized each one. He tried to stop the flow of terrifying thoughts. He needed to focus on a quick elimination. And finally, only Sister Muya remained, advancing on the man. Beryl stabbed the girl right in the heart, rendering her harmless forever. Looking at her face, the man realized the reason for her real liquidation. He closed his eyes in horror. Sister Mayue was eliminated during her terrible work. She was servicing a man, and he destroyed her in a fit of rage. Twilight helped her deal with the man. In her last moment, she gave him her pendant. Mayu's sister only cared about her younger sister until the very end. That's why she asked Twilight to give Mayu's pendant. In honor of the sad elimination of the girl, Beryl covered her with his cloak. To calm her down, then he quickly headed towards the carriage. On the way, he heard shouts about a fire. It turned out that the roof of the warehouse was burning. All the visitors tried to put it out. The men realized that the evidence had been destroyed. Soon, Beryl reached the stables. But the horses were gone, only the tracks of the cart remained. The man remembered how Mayu had asked him to help in case of an emergency. Beryl ran quickly towards the carriage. Each swordsman had his own duty. Beryl remembered the words of the black-haired man. He had been locked in a cage before, but now he was free. Beryl could fulfill his duty, which would come someday. The man, overcoming himself, ran diligently after the carriage to save the captured Miyu. After all, he had promised to help her. The man's words sounded in his head. Now he understood what he had to do. In the past, during the rain, Beryl stood alone among the bodies of boars. His father tried to stop him, and next to the man, other villagers looked at the fallen boars in shock. The boy's father told him not to waste his remaining strength. He tried to stop his son. The man told him that he was already strong enough to even surpass him. However, young Beryl did not believe him. He looked at his father with his deep, terrifying, empty gaze. Beryl had a cramp from running for so long, the man fell to the ground. He started coughing because of the pain in his lungs. But a voice stopped him. It told him to get up from the ground. It was Beryl's inner voice. It said in a firm voice that Beryl had failed to protect anyone again, so he was useless. The man rose heavily from the ground. He didn't dare stop and walked forward with his heavy steps. After all, he had promised Miyu that he would save her. Walking forward, the man raised his gaze upward. Suddenly, Thistle and Kaluni appeared next to him. The girls were on horses. They saw their teacher. Thistle gave her hand to her teacher so that he could sit behind her on the horse. Then the girls galloped forward at a rapid pace. Beryl was surprised by their unexpected appearance. He wanted to know the reason for this. A while ago, Alucia was worried about the situation, so she asked them to go to the church of Svenna. Thistle only had to ask the head for her consent, but she thought that she would not refuse. All the girls were in the stable. Kaluni couldn't believe that the teacher had decided to enter the church alone. Such a thought had never even occurred to her. Alucia, however, thought differently, because she knew that Beryl would stop at nothing if he did something for someone. That was just the kind of person he was. At these words, Alucia simply smiled. Beryl was thoughtful after the explanation. Thistle was sure that when they returned home, Commander Lucy would be told that he had tried well. For Beryl, it would be a great honor. Then Kaluni pulled out a bundle wrapped in cloth from nowhere. The girl handed it to the man. Opening it, Beryl looked at the contents in surprise. It was his own sword. The girl had received the weapon from Shorna. His student and apprentice knew that with this weapon he would become even stronger. They were only sorry that they would not see his first swing. Beryl finally got his hands on the sword. Opening the bundle and removing the cloth wrapped around it, the sword of Zeno Grey Bull appeared before the man. A tired Balder with huge bags under his eyes handed the sword to the girl. He had made the sword, but he only had a few details to finish. First, the teacher had to test it. So Balder handed the weapon over to Kuluni to give to their teacher. After he took the sword by the hilt, the girls felt a stunning pressure from Beryl. They were stunned by this. Beryl thanked for the sword. He received the sword he had long awaited. At the same time, somewhere in the distance, a carriage with horses was calmly setting off. Robari was outside the carriage and played the role of a coachman. The guy was sad because now he wouldn't be able to eat delicious food from Valtrine. In the carriage, the nun, Knight Euro, and the bishop were sitting quietly. Only Miyu was unconscious. Suddenly, someone was rapidly approaching the carriage. Robari heard a noise that someone was on the carriage. The guy, frightened for a minute, turned back. It was Spur. The man took off his helmet. He ordered Robarius to go on. Their journey continued. Then Spur entered the carriage. The bishop praised him for his good work. Spur wanted to know about the recent incident. The black-haired man did not understand why the bishop sent zombified bodies during the battle. The bishop realized that they were the ones who had detained Spur, although this was expected because they were quite difficult opponents. The man did not understand why the bishop had sent them, for he had said that they were an important foundation for the study, and this was true, but the bishop did not care. After all, they were already so close to completing the miracle of resurrection. If everything worked out, they would be able to save many people, and to achieve this, sacrifices had to be made. The bishop reminded the man not to forget about this. If successful, his wish would also be fulfilled. At that moment, Spur grabbed the bishop by the neck in a furious manner. The man looked at his subordinate in shock. But Spur did not loosen his grip, only tightened his grip. The bishop thought that Spur had been held back by the zombified bodies, but that was not the case. The man informed the old man in a dark voice that his opponent was hesitating to strike them. Spur looked at the bishop with a dark gaze. It seemed that for the gray-haired old man, the dead people were just weapons. Therefore, the man suggested that he liquidate himself and then resurrect. However, Euro stopped him from taking further action. After all, if he destroys the bishop, they will no longer be able to study the miracle. Then they will not be able to restore the Church of Steen, nor resurrect Rafi. And only then did Spur loosen his grip and free the bishop. Afterwards, the man told everyone that the swordsman now knew how to destroy the bodies. And all the defeated bodies remained in the church. The bishop tried to catch his breath. He then told him not to worry. If the bodies couldn't move anymore, then there was no trace of the miracle. The magic divisions were unlikely to investigate anytime soon, so the swordsmen simply destroyed the bodies. If they could reach the kingdom of Svendoriardvania, they would no longer be able to pursue them. But Spur had a different opinion. He knew that the swordsman would go to the end. Beryl will break into the kingdom of Svendoriardvania no matter what and save Mia. No matter how many people stand in his way, the man will destroy them all. It's like they took the dragon's child. The gray-haired bishop looked at Spur with a dumbfounded look. He didn't believe his words, because the swordsman was not capable of such a thing. But Spur didn't care what he thought. Beryl would definitely do it. Right now, the wisest decision for them would be to hide somewhere for a while. The bishop still didn't believe him. He thought Spur was talking nonsense. The black-haired man remembered his meeting with Beryl in the tavern. Beryl would do it, all because it was his duty. Suddenly, Fissel landed on the roof of the carriage. Robbery and the people inside the carriage were stunned by her appearance. The girl swung her sword. With one movement, she tore the horses away from the carriage. The horse, freed, quickly ran away somewhere. Ribaria could only look at the cut leash in shock. Fissel, without stopping in place, swung her furious blade again, in order to attack the fair-haired guy, but she didn't have time to do it, because suddenly Iro broke through the roof of the carriage. The nun grabbed Fissel by the blade, not letting her attack the guy. With this, the boy was able to recover. Roberii pulled his sword out of its sheath and wanted to attack the black-haired girl. However, Kuluni did not let him do this. The girl attacked him, but Robari managed to defend himself from the unexpected attack. Kuluni continued to attack the guy. With one movement, she pushed him away from the driver's seat, straight to the side. The fair-haired boy and the girl flew down. Robari could only fall in surprise. Ural heard the boy scream and wanted to turn towards him, but Fissel did not let her do so. The girl lifted the nun up into the sky with her furious blade. Yuro was shocked by her maneuver. Spur put his helmet and scarf back on. He saw all the actions of the attackers and realized that everyone was separated. All this was done to prevent the miracle from being united. The bishop was terrified and did not understand what was happening and where the horses had gone. Spur remembered the swordsman. At that very moment, the black-haired man felt Beryl's appearance. He turned towards the man and ordered the gray-haired old man to run away. After all, Spur would not be able to protect him from Beryl. Beryl looked at his opponent with a calm, gloomy look. At the same time, Robbery and Kaluni were absorbed in the fight. They were still flying down the slope. The guy wanted to get closer to the girl with the help of the tree to attack. But when approaching her, the boy received an attack from her. He was able to dodge the blow with only luck. The force of Kaluni's blow was great, because the blow passed through a piece of land which was immediately destroyed. The scared guy tried to pretend that he was having fun, although in reality he was scared. Kaluni was calm. She was preparing to attack again. Meanwhile, the other pair flew into an old, shabby building. Thistle directed Yuro straight towards the building. Soon they flew inside the house. The girls were ready to attack each other. Each used their sword amplifier. Thistle used magic, Yuro, miracle. Then they swung their swords. Soon they collided. A bright flash illuminated the entire room. Light even came out of the windows of the building. Yuro called the black-haired girl. She knew that she was Thistle Harbera from the magic division. Thistle only asked her about the fact that she knew her. Robari admired Kahuni's monstrous strength. The boy thought that he was fighting with the famous Roaring Blade. But the girl did not agree with this, because the Roaring Blade was stronger than her. Then the boy asked Kaluni to give him a little head start. Thistle and Yuro, standing on the ruins of the building, looked at each other. Everyone was ready to attack.